Drawn to Life is the closest you will ever get to re-experiencing your childhood by playing a video game. There's an unrivaled sense of childlike wonder and artistic freedom that can only come from doodling something on a blank page as a youngster without caring for composition or coloring in the lines, unmatched by any other games out there. What looks like a simple Nintendo DS platformer series made for kids with a focus on using the stylus to draw your own in-game avatar hides a shockingly intricate and fleshed out story that remains in the hearts and minds of those children who grew up with those games and became adults, and I'm one of them. I replayed Drawn to Life over and over until my original cartridge broke. That's how profound of an effect it had on me. I was totally enraptured by these characters and being able to physically interact with the world. Just looking at the covers of these games is bound to have at least one person born in the 2000s onward to go, "Oh, I remember playing that game. These were some of the hottest titles on that system," which is no small feat for how wildly successful the DS was as a console. The marketing kept it real quiet, but while you were having fun drawing, the story was weaving a tragic, heartbreaking tale about religion, the concept of free will, dealing with the death of your family in childhood, betrayal, extinction of an entire race, and an endgame plot twist so mind-bending that Chrono Cross would blush. Depending on who you ask, because it's still a matter of debate among the fanbase, you play as the villain. This is not an RPG series, but it shares a lot of similarities. Big cast of memorable characters, prioritizing story, excellent music. Despite the E for Everyone ESRB rating, this series manages to form one of the biggest tragic narratives in all of gaming, while still keeping it kid-friendly, which is a very impressive feat. It's so all-encompassing that the tragedy even defines the story of the development studio, Fifth Cell, explaining their rise to fame and subsequent crash into obscurity, remembered only by the small but diligent fan community that refuses to let anyone forget how this game affected them, despite all these years later without so much as a peep from the franchise. But there may still be hope yet. This video will cover the core Drawn to Life franchise, mainly the original DS games, the spin-off, and the latest entry in the series. I want people who grew up with this series like I did to understand why I and so many others speak so highly of it, and to cover the unfortunate and sad downward trajectory it had, because all good things must come to an end. Kids don't grow up with the DS anymore, and I want to create a time capsule of sorts to try and explain how good we had it growing up in the 2000s. The series might not look like the typical crop of games I usually review, but rest assured, ye of little faith, it almost certainly is a strange series. But it's a slow burn experience, so I ask for your patience to watch the entire thing to understand where I'm coming from. I'm going to be doing some real, deep psychoanalyzing and explanations for these 15-year-old children's games, because no other channel on YouTube is willing to give strange, obscure, and underrated games like this the good old college try like they deserve. And for that, drop a like for Drawn to Life, sub to the channel to keep yourself updated on new uploads, and check out the Patreon for exclusive content, viewing videos early, and knowing you're personally helping me work harder and faster on consistent quality videos. Also follow me on X. Without further ado, brothers and sisters, let me introduce Drawn to Life and Fifth Cell. Huge thank you to the JawCoin Patreon tier members. More on how you can support me later on. It's difficult to explain the impact the Nintendo DS had on people if you didn't grow up with the console. Early Zoomers can still recount the marvel of using this clamshell device to stay up into the early hours of the morning playing the peak of the Pokemon franchise, or using the Wi-Fi connection to play minigames in the much-debated superior port of Mario 64. The DS is currently the second best video game console of all time, so just about everyone interested in video games at the time had one, or at the very least knew about it when it was out. It was more than just a gaming console. It was so incredibly creatively enabled with the separate screens, microphone, and most importantly, the touchscreen. All of the new peripherals and lower specs of this handheld device meant that its developers had to be creative when designing games for it. And perhaps no one knew this better than Jeremiah Slazka. I'm sorry about the pronunciation, it's a Polish name, please bear with me. Slazka's story in the video game industry is not superbly well documented like Hideo Kojima and Lord British. but it's a story that deserves to be told and remembered. Much of Slazka's past eludes even the most diligent of Internet Archive historians, but we do know that he at least got his start in the industry in the early 2000s. He co-founded a studio called Epix Interactive alongside Joseph Tringali in the Windy City of Chicago. Together, along with their small team, they were going to release a super ambitious MMORPG for the upcoming Xbox, scheduled to release sometime in 2002. Slazka was very inspired by the Final Fantasy series during this process, even allegedly working on Final Fantasy Chronicles in the past, a compilation of the fourth Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger for PlayStation 1. But this claim is a little hard to verify, because I couldn't find any info talking about it other than this archived IGN article. Slazka's vibrant love of RPGs was on full display, because this game, titled Fate, featured a lot of world building about an industrial revolution, racial tension between humans, and all sorts of fantasy creatures from the early stages of development. So much rich detail and lore, when they only had just started development was already penned. It seemed, well, epics, especially for a 2002 release. He and his team cited Phantasy Star Online, Diablo, and EverQuest as inspirations, and eventually competition. Highly ambitious. But did it pay off? Slazka and his team were working diligently until they weren't, because the project was completely cancelled within a year of development, which caused the company to go under. Oops. But you know what feels worse than having your company go under? Having your private information stolen from you, which is why I've teamed up with today's sponsor, Aura. In America, 2.9 billion private records were just stolen by hackers from the national public data, including full names, addresses, and even social security numbers, and they're being sold to the highest bidder online. This actually happened and no one's talking about it. Your social security number can be in anyone's hands, and the NPD isn't going to do anything about it. But you can begin your journey to protect you and your family if you use Aura. Aura is an online all-in-one service and app that alerts you to potential threats to your finances and identity. Data brokers obtain people's email addresses and phone numbers all the time. If your info was recently obtained, Aura sends you an alert so you can act accordingly and keep your private information private. There are so many features Aura offers to keep you and your family safe. I've been a victim of having my information stolen before from a breach in my workplace database. But because Aura's there to help, I can rest a lot easier knowing it's all secure. If this recent American breach concerns you, as it should, then I suggest signing up for a 14-day free trial using my link in the description. Don't let your info fall into the hands of data brokers. Protect yourself and your family. Back to the video. What is the end, if only a new beginning? And in 2003, Slazka, Tringali, and a few others founded Fifth Cell Media in Washington, and went on to make a variety of mobile games, with Slazka as the CEO and creative director, and Tringali as the COO. I'd rather drive off a cliff than talk about mobile games, so the most I'll say is that they were an independent studio that were contacted to make whatever, until they got really buddy-buddy with THQ, which should set off alarm bells for anyone who knows what happened to THQ later on, but for now, it was doing pretty good. According to Slazka, he and his team weren't exactly thrilled to be working on licensed mobile games, but they did value the experience it gave them. When I say mobile games, I'm not talking about no Jetpack Joyride here. This was mid-2000s mobile games, so you're playing these on a flip phone, had to buy them via magazine, or if you were lucky, you had an N-Gage. Their ventures were so successful that in 2006, Fifth Cell made the surprise announcement that they were done with mobile games for the most part and wanted to move on to creating larger, more creative games for the 2-year-old Nintendo DS console. And THQ would publish this venture. They were playing with the big boys now, no more mobile game toys. Normally, a mobile-only developer moving to console games with crazy ambition is kind of a spell for disaster. But we know from Slazka's previous endeavors that creating detailed worlds and stories are something he prioritized greatly. But the hardware of the DS came with a bit of challenge to it. You have to shift your expectations for such a small device to make sure things run well. Consider the huge market of very young kids and casual players that the DS was especially catered for. But Fifth Cell's years as a mobile developer gave them the skill set to scale things back when needed while still making an engaging experience. The team wanted to provide creative, innovative, and unique AAA experiences that brought their ideas to life, something that would give them a unique, distinguished identity. And even more ambitious, Slazka took on the role not only as director, He was the concept creator, the art director, and more. In true savant fashion, he put in 110% to draw his vision to life. In 2007, they unveiled and released their first real game. Their first true step into the games industry forged by their own ideas and minds, drawn to life. The title and box all point to the same thing. This is a game where you use your DS stylus to draw on the bottom touchscreen of the console to interact with the game, which doesn't really show up well on an emulator. I was able to make things work well enough on Melon DS by swapping the top and bottom screen, as well as using my cursor as a makeshift stylus, but this was clearly designed for the original hardware. But good luck capturing native DS footage, so Melon DS is what we're gonna have to deal with. From the title screen, the gimmick of the game is front and center, with the screen being a canvas we can alter or draw whatever we want on. So naturally, I decided to be a mature adult with my drawing abilities. The game opens with a brief but grand appendix of information explaining that the creator formed the world, the forest, the trees, and eventually life in the form of something called reposes, meaning fox in Portuguese, by drawing them in the Book of Life. We're given an opportunity to draw said world, trees, and reposes by our own hand, and the only depiction of the creator is a hand holding the DS stylus. Even the target audience can put together that we are in fact the creator, acting as God to these creatures. And the book we read from is called the Book of Life. So within 1 minute of expository gameplay, we learn that we are God, the Abrahamic God, which is a lot to take in at once, especially if you took some creative liberties in drawing the reposes in your own image. The Book of Life explains that something called the darkness has come in that God, we have abandoned the reposes, with the event being dubbed the Fall. It should be quite obvious to most Western adults, but this series is heavily inspired by Christian theology. If paraphrasing the fall of the angels from heaven and having you assume the role of God wasn't enough of a hinter. The entire video will have a lot of biblical examples and stories, so know what you're getting into. Everyone has stopped worshipping you and has left the village, but there is still someone who believes. A young reposer named Mary. Mary? I actually don't know. Mary begs God to come back because nearly everyone has fled the village since it fell into darkness. You're actually able to tell her you won't come back and be firm in abandoning your subjects, which causes an instant game over and sends you back to the title screen. I love when games do that. You speak to her clearly, not unlike God speaking to Moses through the burning bush, telling her to gather as many people as she can, which proves to go pretty poorly because the only remaining people are her best friend Joey and her father, the mayor, who don't believe her claims of the creator returning. Ever resolute, or perhaps just terrified because Mary looks positively gobsmacked, she and Joey enter a location called the Creation Hall to enact the plan to save everyone and bring them back together by breathing life into this derelict wooden mannequin. The tone of this scene, and essentially for the entire game, is very light. The town is cast in darkness, surrounded by snow and without a sun or sky, but portrayed in a very friendly, children's fantasy way, and less of a cosmic horror way. Dramatic events happen and the characters take things seriously, but things never get too grim or downcast, because the E for Everyone rating would explain why a species abandoned by God isn't depicted as the horrifying nail in the coffin event it would be for us humans if that would happen, because we would probably riot and kill each other. But I don't think this is a bad thing. If anything, it's more impressive that such a heavy-handed topic is treated well and fits within the beginnings of an established narrative. It's filled with a lot of symbolism and biblical anecdotes. Mary, aside from her name being a very obvious reference to a lot of biblical figures, is a very biblical figure in her own right, the one who refuses to give up hope in God and still remains faithful. All at once she is Moses communicating with the Creator, and Job as she pleads her feelings of being abandoned. The splitting of the village is not unlike the tribes of Israel being scattered. And finally, the wooden mannequin acts as our golem, an artificial being created with the breath of God described most often in the Talmud. That's its own loaded topic, but Drawn to Life takes some liberties with these concepts. Mainly being that instead of a complicated magical ritual involving a studious rabbi printing out names on paper to slip it into, we instead must draw a new body for this golem, with the creator even saying, I will fill this mannequin with my presence. I hope you understand why Japan subtitled this game with God's Marionette when it was localized. Thus, we spoke, and now we are properly introduced to the drawing mechanics. Every instance of something needing to be drawn has a base representing how large it could possibly be. We have our color palette, 3 different sizes of brushes, a paint bucket tool to fill all, eraser tool, a lock tool to draw straight lines, a single-use undo tool that only goes back 1 step, and a clear button to start over from scratch. If that sounds very basic, it is, and we are promptly introduced with the biggest problem with Drawn to Life. The drawing to life. This is an extremely basic, some would say primitive system, like Mario Paint primitive. There are different color palettes to choose from, but they all need to be unlocked through in-game progression. It's hard to communicate because I'm using an emulator, but the bottom screen of the DS is like 3 inches tall and wide. So using your DS stylus, or creator forbid your fingertips for drawing, because everyone lost a stylist, can be kind of a demanding task for something that requires a lot of precision. You can zoom in to count individual pixels if you so please, but having to draw an avatar from scratch is still a demanding task that mystified the target audience. Because let's face it, most kids playing this game were not the Warrior Cats Invader Zim artsy girls who can draw pixel art shockingly well despite no formal art lessons. They were kids like me who had a tough time with stick figures. But therein lies the beauty of the system. You aren't being judged for your artistic abilities, or inability. The game fundamentally does not care what you are drawing or how capable you are of drawing it. There's no point system ranking anything or any judgment or criticism. You're just told to draw something and what purpose it serves. The rest is left up to you, to your infant creativity and wisdom, which I think is a much better approach for children and to increase your artistic ability. You don't have to be guided, you can put anything. Many of these drawings you'll be seeing again and again, and you are always free to redraw whatever you'd like in the Hall of Creation. It makes me want to try again and work a little bit harder, when I can easily picture a child's blossoming art career starting like that. The screen is too small and the system is maybe a little too open-ended and doesn't really encourage putting a lot of effort past whatever self-scrutiny you might have, however. Because just as many people are their own harshest critics, many are fine coasting doing the bare minimum. I know the point isn't to make nice drawings, just drawings in general, but maybe not having giant unshaded solid color blocks representing everything would be nice. I think the game should have come with some tutorials or tips or tricks on color theory, pixel shading, stuff like that. I don't think I'm asking too much for a kid's game, just some text before and after examples of how much better something can look with some pointers. I don't think it discourages kids from drawing whatever they want, especially if the tutorials are optional and not forced on you. The DS just isn't the most ideal system for something like this. At least if you had the original DS. Nowadays, the DSi XL and even the 3DS XL gives you much more room to experiment and draw without hitting the edges of the screen as much. I have a lot more to say about the system, but just understand what I think about the basics for now. The developers threw us a bone here and gave us a couple templates for the hero in various styles. You can make your hero look like Buddy on the box art, or as horrible as humanly possible. You're free to modify the templates how you please, so I scrubbed away some sort of knight here and made him my own, naming him Elohim, a word that means a lot of things, but in this context it means gods, because the hero is an avatar on Earth of the creator, thus his name points to the man in charge. The mannequin is brought to life before Joey and Mary's eyes, and we rush on to find the scattered Reposes. But our path is blocked by a darkness-cloaked Reposa named Wilfrey, who taunts us that the Book of Life is destroyed and its pages are scattered around the world, claiming to be a creature of bedtime stories and pure evil. And I believe him! I mean, look at this guy. Has there ever been a character in fiction that cloaks itself in darkness that hasn't been completely evil? He blocks the only real way out of town in impassable darkness. All seems lost, but there is hope. The village has something called a snow gate, which acts as a kind of wormhole to a different part of the world, and is literally just a giant door in the ground that leads to somewhere. Without dwelling on how stargates and wormholes fit into the Bible, we're thrown into our first platforming level, the real meat and potatoes of the game. I always liked how they went with a snow world instead of a generic Super Mario or Kirby grasslands. It's a small way to mix things up a bit. The scrolling backgrounds are a really nice touch. The evidently hand-drawn art style and washed-out colors really make the entire stage look like something that could be drawn in the Book of Life yourself. The tone is dire, but the music is jolly and feel-good, a warm beginning to such a cold opening. The controls are easy to understand. A to jump over obstacles and enemies' heads, and X does this weird shove move that doesn't actually damage enemies, but pushes them away. Like the TF2 shortstop alt-fire shove. Pressing the jump button and down activates an extremely delayed ground pound, more useful for busting open crates and coins than attacking. Sliding down ledges is somehow your most powerful attack and usually one-hit kills everything, so do it as much as you can. Even from the first level, I noticed something. There's something deeply wrong with our character's hitbox, in that it is insanely large and results in you taking a lot of extra damage you otherwise wouldn't in any other game. Remember the template we had to follow for character creation? I think the hitboxes, as well as the general logic and registration for every drawable item in the game, follows this guide. So things tend to feel a bit wonky. I didn't fill up the entire space, but I think it's still registered to take up the entire frame regardless. So the negative unused space is still registered as you, resulting in you still taking damage. This is a lot more serious of an issue than it seems, because the character creation is so freeform, but the in-game logic might not know how to account for a child making an extremely small or warped character that takes damage from his phantom limbs. I didn't really understand what was going on until a couple of levels in, so imagine how confused a child might feel while playing casually, let alone in a boss fight. It's not like jumping on these guys' heads doesn't work. It's that you take a lot of unnecessary damage. There's something to be said about the screen crunch too. You don't have a lot of screen real estate to see what's in front or behind you, which meant I ran into a lot of enemies head first throughout the entire game because the camera's so far zoomed in. Just zooming out and allowing us to see more of the level would completely solve this problem, but I kinda just bumped into everything like an idiot. Besides that, we find a few dotted line empty spaces throughout the map, which lets us know that a canvas is nearby for us to draw various objects to progress. They follow the same logic as the character creation, but with a noticeable lack of templates or examples. It's not like it's hard to draw a cloud to platform on, but it's not a very gentle transition from gameplay to drawing. Whenever I saw a canvas, I kinda sighed to myself because I knew I had to stop everything and draw a platform to move on 3 to 4 times a stage, and there's almost 20 levels, so you can only run and gun so far in any level before you have to stop everything and do something slow-paced that just doesn't flow properly. Think of it like you're playing Mega Man and had to stop 3 times a stage to do a slide puzzle. It's kind of just unintuitive. And if you just draw something as quickly as possible and don't fill out all the space, you run into the problem of messing up your platforming. Like, I drew something lame for these vines later on, and you just slide right off. Look at that. This isn't a hard game, not at all. This is not intentional challenge, it's just very frustratingly janky. I don't know how I would remedy the constant interruptions of the drawing segments though. Would it work better if you front-loaded it at the start of each level? Maybe drawing all those things in the start would rip off the band-aid, so to speak. Maybe it's just me, but like just trying to play the game, it's like, do you see a canvas? Like, oh, okay, gotta stop and draw this thing. And then doing it 3-4 times, it makes the levels feel so goddamn long. There's more to say, but for now we find the mayor, trapped inside of a shadowy cage by Wilfrey. He returns to his daughter, but we have to go back inside for our first real level to rescue more villagers. But not before we obtain a snow-shooting gun weapon. It works by using the D-pad to aim it and pressing B to fire. But wow, is this thing ever slow. It takes a lifetime and a half to hit anything with this. So outside of maybe 1 or 2 situations where you have a lot of distance between you and your target, I actually don't recommend using this weapon, just stick to jumping. What the tutorial level didn't prepare us for with the real levels is that this game is actually a collectathon. You have to find 4 page scraps for each page in the scattered Book of Life, as well as 3 caged reposes to the rescue. There's also this black gunk we can erase with the touchpad that spawns these shadow enemies. Most of them aren't too hard to deal with, except these bats. Oh my god, these bats! It's hard to hit them with snowballs because they fly sporadically around the projectiles and fly too high to be comfortably stopped. So you better pray you can hit them just in time without getting hit and thrown back via knockback like it's Castlevania. So in order to progress, we have to collect these 4 pages in 3 reposes, and they aren't laid out in a straight line. Each level is a miniature maze of sorts with branching paths to break up the linearity. If you get too far without collecting what you need, you get blocked, so you can't get to the very end without realizing you missed everything. It's a good system. It incentivizes you to explore the level to find what you need. But there's one small, teeny tiny, itty bitty problem. There's no map. This might not sound like a super damning complaint, but believe me, it really does act as a huge monkey wrench and pain in my ass. It's not like the levels are super complicated or require a lot of brain power to complete. They aren't. It's just irritating to having to search for some of these items hidden in nooks and crannies you've passed over 8 times to find something. Okay, think about it in Metroid terms. Imagine having no map to find everything. So play Metroid 1. You want to play Metroid 1? No you don't, because that game sucks. I'm obviously exaggerating, this isn't a Metroidvania. But every so often, a level just has some dastardly paths that manage to stay hidden from plain sight. And somehow World 1 was the shining worst example of this. Because each subsequent world I found was much easier and a lot more fun to navigate. This one just sucks. It's not difficult, not at all. Just not very time efficient. I feel like I'm wasting so much time. Just having a little box map in the start menu would do wonders. Or maybe I just really hate mazes, I don't know. Feels like I'm back in the O&A turkey maze. Once we collect everything we need, we exit through the door at the end and return to interact with the characters we've just rescued. We found Isaac and his family, and he runs the only shop in town. That's where you can buy the extra pallets, you can get some stamps for the characters, music tracks, and extra moves. All of which are secrets that can be found in each level. I'll be honest, I didn't really find much use in these, but it's something to spend your coins on at least. The mayor explains to us Wilfrey's origin, and how things became so dark. Literally. Wilfrey was once a Raposa, but no ordinary Raposa. He was described as the center of attention at all times, ambitious and prideful. He believed that he could draw creations better than the creator, and sought to prove it by stealing the Book of Life. His creations came out black and malformed, ugly and warped. The mayor was able to take back the book, but not before Wilfrey tore out countless pages and fled. In the center of town, the Eternal Flame, the monument dedicated to the creator, went dim, and the Hall of Creation closed, signifying us, the creator, abandoning the Raposas, which led to all of our creations slowly vanishing, like the sun, the sky, and the stars. The mayor blames himself for the mishap, and can't help but watch as people are scattered from the village, trying to relocate to new homes. The symbolism is laid on quite heavy, and just about anyone can point out how Wilfrey is an allusion to Lucifer, often described as the most beautiful and beloved angel in heaven, whose pride led him to start a war on God, which failed, and he was cast out of his home. The event in-game is called the Fall, and there aren't any angelic figures, rather Raposas are the stand-in for humans, are kind of being mixed together. So the Fall was the Raposas taking the creator's gifts for granted and trying to play God themselves, which led to their fall. Wilfrey loses his original form and takes on a darker one, like how Lucifer is typically attributed to have changed into Satan after the fall, the adversary, the opponent to all of the Raposas. The Eternal Flame Monument is named that specifically because it's already a biblical item, though some might know it as an altar or sanctuary lamp. It represents God's eternal presence, so the flame being snuffed out is quite indicative. We, the creator, are very much an Old Testament God, minus all the smiting and plagues, that is. The Raposas are very much the faithful Hebrews who are learning to rekindle their faith after the creator sent his avatar to gather them for their own safety. The village used to be full of green grass, now blanketed by harsh winters. The eternal flame has lost all of its color, but now we can draw it back to life and regenerate it. Every time you rescue new Raposas, you tap the flame, and get to clear out some of the darkness from town. It's super satisfying to see the more of the hub world open up more and more, the houses of the Reposes re-emerging from the dark, seeing the town grow with more and more people. You can visibly see the environment change with each level. It's wonderful. This also opens up the well that you can throw coins into and potentially get a reward out of it, which I ended up doing a lot to gain a whole bunch of extra lives. But you know what happened if you dump 10,000 coins into the well all at once? It's my Patreon! 15 years before it was created! Well, it would be rude not to talk about it now. My Patreon has all sorts of awesome stuff on there, including exclusive, high-quality videos that aren't allowed on YouTube, my thoughts on whatever film or game I've just consumed, insights into future videos with frequent updates, or if you just want to support my effort in reviewing games no one else will, then toss me some change, or get your name featured in my uploads with the Jawcoin tier. You certainly don't have to, but if you do, it means more videos can come out faster, and higher quality. Plus, I love grifting. It's something to consider at least. From here on out, you just complete levels as they become unlocked, find more people, and draw more things to improve the village. Level 2 has you retrieve the page for the sun, so the people can finally be warm again. Joey likes to ask you how your adventures go after each level, and he really wants to go with us as a sidekick, but we don't even grace him with a response. What an asshole! So this entire time, I've just been calling the Reposa village the Village, because it doesn't seem to have an official name. But now we're given the opportunity to name it. So, naturally, I named it Crunkland, because Crunk ain't dead. Yeah! We enter level 3, and I've noticed that basically everything we have an opportunity to draw in the game are just varying platforms. Aside from your character and your weapon, most of your actual drawing is just being given a box and being told to draw platforms. Some of these rotate or spin or have different physics, but ultimately, they're all just platforms. I don't think it was a bad idea to have you draw out very simple concepts considering the target audience, but I'm not sure if every kid would really care to draw 2 separate clouds depending on if they're moving or not. Out of 100 or so potential drawings featured, nearly half of them being various platforms is kind of underwhelming. Drawing is the way you interact with the world in the game. It's the point of the game, it's in the title. So all you really do is just jump on the drawings. There's not a lot of differing gameplay mechanics. There's like animals you can draw, but it's just stuff you jump on. It's like in Mario Maker if you were only allowed to draw platforms and not anything else. It's kind of missing the oomph, right? Regardless, this level brings us the page for a crop called the banya, an essential crop for everyday life in Crunkland. The Reposes rely on the banya for everyday life. It is to the Irish what the potato is, or the taro to the Hawaiians. Slaska claims it works kind of like corn. All sorts of tasty treats are baked with this crop, but I wish there was some kind of discussion amongst the villagers to have some equivalent to eating unleavened bread on Passover. I feel like the Reposes must suffer more, because I am a jealous creator. Oh, also, Joey is down bad for Mary. Like, tremendously down bad. A lot of people misremember these two as siblings, but no, they're not. No, they're not. The Reposes are perhaps the cutest and most charming representation of ancient Hebrews I've ever seen. Most of them have quite a bit of different things to say when you talk to them. You get to talk to Reposes of all various walks of life, from the young, the adult, to the elderly, who are all thankful for their humble wealth and firm health in the Creator. But things aren't tense with the Creator's living avatar around the village. They engage in a lot of playful banter with you. They even have a snowball fight. The village feels like a real location, and these creatures have accepted you as one of their own, not as an entirely venerated figure, because worship is safe for the Creator. This village feels like a place I'm always welcome in a way. It's a location I like to return to. It makes me feel at ease and comfortable, ranking highly among my assorted list of comfy video game areas. People here have distinct jobs and roles. It feels very uniform. Everyone has something to do. It reminds me a little of the village I grew up in my teenage years. We gradually obtain the sun, the sky, and the rain, allowing the snow to be washed away and for the green grass to grow once again, the village resembling how it used to be in the flashbacks. Mary and her father discuss their lineage of mayors leading the town for 7 generations, and the current mayor decides to teach her the ways of leadership. Each mayors record the history of the village in a book inside the Creation Hall just before they pass on. Oh, this guy is so dead, isn't he? Mary, understandably, is very nervous and tries to vent to Joey, who has no idea what she's talking about and would rather try and convince us to take him on the next adventure. So Wilfrey rudely interrupts and says, "What if dragon?" A dragon, more of a worm really, is heading straight for the village, so we have to go stop it. It's our first boss, and it's nothing too crazy. Just dodge his bites and assault him with snowballs and ground pound him a few times. Nothing complicated. We rescued this interesting little girl, someone with darkness covering half her head. She seems to be completely mute as well, so she's placed under Joey's care to teach the young simp some responsibility. Their relationship is a little static due to this little girl being unable to speak, but it's still quite charming. The two are never far apart. They're more like a boy and his dog than anything else, this small feral child. For some reason, we know her name is Heather, but we aren't entirely sure why. There shouldn't be any lasting consequences with this character, I hope. Overall, the first world did a good job at teaching us the basic mechanics, but I can't say I was exactly swooning to return to it ever again. It was a very mediocre platforming experience that somehow felt like it lasted entirely too long, but too brief to really get the hang of it. But when we explore the restored eastern wing of the village, the forest gate is available, which dramatically spices things up. Your snowball launcher, that pitiful wasted piece of junk, is replaced with an acorn launcher, which works similarly, but the acorns bounce on the ground, kind of like the bouncer in Ratchet & Clank. It proves a far more useful tool than I can actually recommend using. Only took us a quarter of the game to get a real weapon worth your time. Beyond that, we're given a pair of wings that allow us to double jump and slow our descent, giving us so much more control. The level design has become so much more vertical to compensate, which makes finding the missing reposes and templates a lot more interesting. It's such an interesting theme too. It's a forest tall enough to stretch into space, so you get all these awesome purple space backgrounds, but mixed with lush greens and earthy browns. World 2 is a marked, distinguished improvement over World 1 in nearly every way. I was actually having fun exploring the world and finding stuff. These levels just feel better paced, there's more going on, and I actually wanted to boot up the emulator to play again. Oh, we have our own disappearing floating blocks. Oh. They aren't too bad, actually. They're very forgiving. The only thing that stayed the same is the drawings, just coloring a lot of platforms. We bring back the moon and the stars in the night sky, which activates a day-night cycle that continues for the entire game. The music is subdued and the village is quiet at night, lively in the day. It's a small detail, but does wonders for immersion. I do kind of wish some of the dialogue was more tailored for day or night though, like the younger reposes go to bed, the older ones are a bit slower, people are sleeping, some night crew going on. Joey runs into the forest like a moron to try and find an exotic flower to try and give to Mary. But a guy we rescued earlier named Zasha likes to steal a lot, and he swipes it right under his nose like a total cockblock. The conclusion to this is crazy. And the explanation to get there might be crazier. Okay, so you rescue this Elvis-looking Raposa, and everyone decides to have a festival, which involves rapping about gleefully killing people, of course. And the mayor wants Mary to give a speech to tell people about her mayor training, to get them hyped. She tries to dip at the event, and she's kind of nervous about it, so we need to get her. And by us, I mean we get third-wheeled by Joey's plan B to woo Mary, by giving her a book on whales, which goes exactly how you think it would. But then Zasha just shows up, returns the flower to Joey, and dips. He was watching this the entire time and would not let Joey fumble this situation disastrously. He's like, no, you gotta take this, bro. I can't watch any longer. Mary likes the flower enough to gain the confidence to try and do said speech. And I do mean try, because she messes it up so badly. Like a, "Hello, college professor, I am humbly writing you to ask for an extension for this assignment I forgot existed" kind of screw up. A lot of the villagers get kind of antsy with each other because they're not really sure what's going on between the mayor and Mary, and we see several examples of Mary trying and failing to solve the solution, while the mayor can do it basically without trying. You heard it here, folks. Women can't be leaders according to Drawn to Life. Oh, hey, Wilfrey's here. He's got another boss fight for us. Deadwood is a massive tree that you have to scale and shoot these teeny tiny acorns at while avoiding infinite spawning shadow enemies. Doesn't sound like much of a problem, right? It's honestly really annoying to precisely hit the corns while weaving between these fucking bats. What is it with bat enemies being the worst in every game they're featured in? I still have nightmares about those fucking bats from Crash 1. Creator forbid you actually shoot them all, because there's a second phase. You enter inside Deadwood, and you have to shoot this spindly, shadowy gecko that flings itself across the walls and floors with reckless abandon, often just ramming right into you. The hero doesn't exactly turn swiftly, so avoiding the lizard with split-second decisions is not an entirely feasible task. Remember, 4 hits and you're dead. But this Raposa in like an Organization 13 hoodie can sometimes, and I do mean sometimes, throw hearts to restore your health. But what if you run out of acorns? It's not like jumping on this lizard is a valid option, it doesn't work. You have to keep tapping this slowly regenerating pile of acorns that gives you 5 of them per pickup. And you better hope you wisely aim using your 30 starting corns, or you'll get trapped in this awful cycle of avoiding the lizard, collecting ammo, missing like all your shots, and avoiding the shadow tenders on the wall, getting health, running away, getting the acorns, trying to get the health, trying to avoid the shadows. Every video with this boss fight is people talking in the comments section about how hard it was. And granted, literally everyone is viewing this game in retrospect, and this game is a lot harder when you're 8 years old, but no one will blame you for save stating this. This sucks, I hated this. Once we eventually win that, we bring back Samuel to the village, who actually isn't a bad guy, he's just a weird loner. Okay, in my script, I wrote, here's a weird loner, you know, like Onision. What? Onision is not, it's like the worst fucking example I've ever heard. Why did I write that? So I don't even want to change it. More of the village is opened, revealing a beach-like region coastline with sand, a ship port, and the gate to the next world. With a new world comes change, and while we lose our nifty wings, we get these horrible, awful, terrible flippers in exchange that really make me not want to play this game anymore. Beforehand, we weren't able to touch water in any other world than here, and the water physics are really something terrible to behold. It feels like you're wading through syrup. You turn so slowly that the Canadian hospitals will tell you to speed it up. Darting forward is fairly speedy, but trying to avoid crashing into something, which is easy to do because the screen cutoff in this game is crazy, is a different story. Our new weapon is a homing starfish launcher, which I feel a little mixed on. It works just fine shooting straight ahead, and the homing does indeed work, it's just imprecise and clunky, a recurring trend that follows the entire game, really. Trying to hit a faster enemy like these fish is a pipe dream, let alone dodge them. We at least get this seaweed to hide behind, but I feel like the water physics shouldn't be that hard to program. New Super Mario Bros. Came out a year beforehand on the same platform. I get that 5th Cell wanted each world to feel unique, which they did succeed on. The way you traverse is entirely different each time, but there's noticeable gaps in quality with your kit and the level design between each one, at least in my opinion. It's not nearly as fun to slowly wade through water or flip through very simple water draining trident switches to find the stuff you need versus just having wings to explore. I will say that World 3 is by far the easiest level. Given how slow water makes everything, it's very easy to just find little nooks and crannies that were more of a pain in the ass in World 1. Things are laid out very, very simple here. Something cool is that there's an underwater ruins motif throughout, showing the Baki enemies as statues and whatnot. It makes me think about how empty the world is outside of Crunkland. Even the later city levels are rather devoid of life. Not every Raposa we free was originally from our village, but this is a very empty world, either because Wilfree's been doing a lot of killings, or the global population is like Ice Age level. There's like 20,000 Raposas on Earth in total. And one of them is Crazy Barks, who speaks nothing but gibberish. Heather likes him though, so he's chill. We also have to meet some sketchy pirates who have to be negotiated with. In exchange for giving up a ship we have, they don't loot the village and kidnap all our women. Joey seems pretty chill with them, is intent on actually joining them and thirst for adventure, at least for a time. He's always wanted to go on some kind of journey, but it's just never been in the cards for him so far. He's a very childish character. But perhaps when everything blows over, maybe some sea shanties are in store for him. That or dying of dysentery and scurvy. These pirates try and leave with the ship, but a giant anglerfish surrounds us, our third boss fight. So far, the boss fights have been either okay, kind of mediocre, I can deal with them, But this one? Oh, you are not ready for the insanity and pain you are about to face. So the entire fight is underwater. We've established that trying to change directions is really stiff and slow. What if the boss was not only incredibly fast, takes up most of your screen? His primary attack is just bum rushing you from one of 3 directions, forewarned with a stream of bubbles. Not that you have time to move out of the way, mind you. He also spits out several of those fish enemies, which aren't that hard to take care of, but that means you will very easily run out of your limited starfish ammo, leaving you with 0 means of attack besides hoping a drop of additional 5 fish comes from that Raposa in the cage. But it's random, he doesn't always drop the stars, and 5 stars is nothing! The easiest attack he has to avoid is this one, where he just floats towards you and chomps. The only real strategy here is to get close enough and just mash the gun as much as your hands can handle, and use the iframes to just keep mashing and drain his health. When he swims down the middle, just hope you can catch him quick enough and bleed half his health right then and there. If you don't, well, you either get stuck in the cycle of just waiting for additional health and ammo to be drip-fed in you like Deadwood, or you just die. You just die immediately. It was genuinely miserable. I felt like I was throwing peanuts at this guy. This is easily the worst part of the entire game. No questions asked, and something I dread thinking about reviewing the footage in Premiere. It took me 30 goddamn minutes with this boss. I hated it. I hated it. I can't imagine how a child would feel fighting this. Oh my god. I'm like, how did kids accept that? This sucks. This might be one of the worst fights I've ever had to deal with. And it feels frustrating because it's so simple. If you could just move out of the way, this would not be a hard fight. If the starfish gun would just work, it wouldn't be hard. Why did you make it like this? All this trouble to rescue a vampire Raposa who drinks tomato juice. You're welcome, buddy. After that slog is finished, we get to clear out most of the clouds of darkness for good, and we find 2 doors this time around. One that leads to Rapo City, the final world, and a mysterious uncolored one that leads to an unknown location. With these seeds we've gathered a couple levels ago, we can properly enter the 4th world and what are we doing? So for this world we ditch weapons and just become massive? It's like having a mega mushroom on at all times. It's ridiculous. It also means that instead of getting a firearm, we get this kick attack that hits everything in front of it without fail. So no more being tormented by bats, just bulldoze everything in your path. This is really easy, and it's honestly very fun to just stomp on these things without even trying. We also find a human here. Not a Raposa, a human. His name is Mike. He doesn't even really do anything. He just shows up confused and not really sure how he got there. And everyone is really uncomfortable around him. I think he's got amnesia? He's not really sure what's going on. I'm sure this guy will have no major importance and relevancy way later on, so don't worry about it. We built a hidden beach away from the public one, where Mary, her father, Joey, and us know about. Village of 50 Raposas and a human, and yet there's private property. We live in a society. Mary has had it trying to deal with any responsibility whatsoever and rejects her role as a mayor and storms off. The mayor wants to deal with the family situation, but his responsibility to fully restore the Book of Life comes first, and he asks us to find the final 2 pages, one for a legendary sword and the page for the secret door in the true north of the village. Once we forge the sword from that level, we head to the final page when... We weren't there. The mayor died. Wilfrey has stolen the Book of Life, and the village has lost its leader. I think we all kind of knew the mayor's time was borrowed, and Wilfrey was likely the one to cash that check. I wasn't expecting the reverse flash execution though. This is an excellent moment because it happens while we're away. We have to wait and anticipate everyone's reactions after the level we play. It colors the entire segment in a downcast and dire aura that motivates you to burn through it as fast as you can. Instead of being giant, the gameplay's changed again. We're now lugging around a giant sword behind us. Like all the weapons, it's kind of clunky, it isn't super responsive, but I have to admit, a golem of God dragging a sword as big as his entire body, looking to slay the fallen Raposa, pretty goddamn brutal. Imagine being one of those malformed shadow creatures, seeing this nearly silent golem dragging a hunk of metal behind him, ready to cleave you in two. It makes me wish we got to use this weapon a lot more than just 2 or 3 levels. It's easily my favorite. When we gather the final page, we have to console with the villagers, especially Mary about the death of her father, the leader of the village. People were more at odds than ever, but his death made them realize that they need to stick together and to trust Mary. Even if she hasn't shown much leadership potential, they want to nourish her and make sure she grows into that position. It takes a village to raise a child, after all. Our creations start rapidly vanishing as Wilfrey tears out the pages from the book once more, stealing our resolve to enter the final door and deal with him for the final time. The last level is full of old callbacks from previous levels mixed together to make a short but satisfying build-up. There are no more pages to find or Raposes to rescue. It's just you versus him. He sticks a giant scorpion at us. We can't jump on it lest we be skewered. We have to carefully time sword swings to block him and avoid his poisonous black breath. That creates cloud platforms to hop on and strike Wilfrey. Do this several times and the scorpion vanishes. But Wilfrey's not happy. He darts around the arena throwing tridents and falling stars from the sky. Our creations, perverted to be used against us. He's invincible during his attacks. But when he moves to the other side of the screen, there's your chance to tag him. This fight is pulse pounding and keeps you on your toes, but entirely fair. There's occasional health drops when you need them, and your sword requires no ammo. The biggest problems of the previous boss fights of being restricted by ammo and inconsistent health drops are gone. This is a very solid final encounter that feels properly epic. It's tough, but fair. Wilfrey's finally perished. Creation as we know it is saved, and the Book of Life is returned to its new owner, Mary. The pages are restored and all is well. All that's left to do is sign our name in the book until Mary is ready for hers. We catch up with the characters for the final time. Crazy Barks is somehow able to teach Heather how to talk? We learn that Zasha has a child to support through his theft. Even Mike gets a moment with the doctor we rescued in the second to last level. Is this ending sappy? Absolutely. But satisfying? Even more so. I really got to know these characters by this point, and even if most of them didn't get a full character arc, they didn't really need to. The mayor, while his life was cut short, was ultimately able to pass on his duties to his daughter, who is beginning her arc as the new mayor. But there's one more Raposa who needs to start his arc. Joey leaves on the pirate ship, prepared to chase his heart and live out his dreams of adventure. Mary is distraught, but she feels like she can handle the responsibility alone. Or at least deal with it enough to let Joey live his life without shackling him down. We get this wonderful vocal song playing as a recap of our adventure plays. Also, notice those weird heart monitor sounds? Probably nothing. Well, he couldn't leave her side for too long. The two crazy Raposas embrace one last time for now, as the ghost of the mayor and us watch on and leave, knowing Crunkland is in good hands. The relationship between the two is something that's consistently shown all throughout. Mary has to shoulder a lot of responsibility, but Joey's eager for adventure, to a reckless fault. He cares about other Raposas, especially Mary, but isn't able to properly explain his feelings. He wants to feel important, and Mary wants to be a leader, but neither of them really obtain that until the very end of the game. This song playing called Mary plus Joey explains their relationship, where Joey's kind of a +1, not as important as Mary, which leads to Mary feeling isolated and struggling to connect with someone who cares about her. Their relationship is only expanded and gets way crazier in next chapter. What can I say about Drawn to Life that hasn't been said by someone reminiscing on it already? While it isn't an amazing platformer, or even a particularly great one, it's entirely serviceable. The titular drawing mechanic does feel a little underwhelming when the bulk of it involves stopping in place and drawing platforms. In a 2007 interview, THQ's product development manager Scott Rogers said that the player is creating the game's content, which I think is kind of an overstatement. The game's already drawn. It's not WarioWare DIY. You just draw interactive objects that complement the game world that's already there. But drawing your own avatar works pretty well, and served as a fun showcase of the DS's technology, even if by today's standard, it's outdated. I chose to create Elohim, but aside from just using the templates, no two people are gonna have this exact same hero. It's an excellent creative application and the best example of the drawing system. You could even send each other's heroes to each other via the DS's Wi-Fi system. The game is really a time capsule. You just had to be there when it launched on the DS. I suppose one could say it's a bit outdated, but I wouldn't say that. There really isn't a game series in the same niche as Drawn to Life, so this is a certified old school and vintage title. The music absolutely has standout tracks. Most of it falls quite neatly into the serviceable territory. The snow world sounds like a snow world, the beach world sounds like a beach world. Nothing here is too unexpected, which isn't a bad thing. David J. Franco, the game's composer, has spent a lot of time with Fifth Cell, as you'll see later on, and his growing skill is going to be documented alongside other instrumental members. There was a lot of story and world building here, far beyond the typical Call of Duty for children's game, and that's no surprise when you know who made the game, someone inspired by story-heavy PlayStation games. This isn't a one-and-done game. I spent a surprising amount of time on this title. A casual playthrough can easily last 10 hours, which might not sound like a lot, but for a kid's DS game, that's quite lengthy. I spent a lot of time critiquing and analyzing the game, but I've been shuffling around an obvious elephant in the room. This is a game made for kids. All the stuff I personally had gripes with, would a child even notice or care? It's not like all kids are stupid, even if growing up with an iPhone basically guarantees that. They just wouldn't have formed standards to care. I had only played so many 2D platformers before Drawn to Life, so my bar for what I considered great wasn't the same as it was now. And other people are bound to have different standards as well. That's the fun part of life. I'm sure most kids playing this don't care about if the platforms are kind of janky or if a boss sucks. Kids only get so many games to play with, so they really have to make them last. That's how I remembered playing on my first game consoles, the Nintendo 64, the PS2, etc. Remember how I said I grew up with these games? Well, I grew up with the spin-off and next chapter. I actually never played this original entry until I needed footage, so that's why I didn't sound super nostalgic over it. But it allowed me to view the game without that shackle, and subsequently view the entire sequels in a similar light without being too biased. I needn't remind you that Fifth Cell was almost entirely a mobile game developer until this game, so to have a mostly successful landing with their first real title is a great accomplishment and the start of something truly great. I know I talked a lot of game about this series' story and payoffs, but in order to do that you have to complete Game 1, because that's what the sequel's about. So I highly recommend you don't tab out of this while you're playing in the background. I know you're watching it in the background. Don't lie. I want to show you a secret this game has to offer. First, accumulate 10,000 coins. I really hope you've been saving them throughout your playthrough because coin farming is not something you want to spend your time on. And dump them into the fountain. With this, we get access to the Developer's Grotto, a hidden area where we get to talk to the little chibi forms of the game devs. This is incredibly charming, and I think it does a really great job of communicating how much fun they've had making this game more than anything I've even said so far. Jeremiah himself even peddles a fake rumor on how to revive the mayor like he's General Leo or Eris. It's great. So, how well did Drawn to Life perform? Fifth Cell had quite a bit going for them, a bright, innovative team and an eager publisher, and some cushy marketing for a first project. But I don't think anyone was expecting this game to sell around 1 million copies in 1 year. Drawn to Life was a breakout success for a new development team. While reviews settled it consistently as a 7 out of 10, its target audience, children who owned a Nintendo DS, so basically everyone who didn't treat it like an annual Pokemon machine, it reached a huge casual audience that otherwise might not have been interested in playing an adventure game like this. Fifth Cell was immensely pleased with the immense amount of money it brought, as was their publisher, THQ, but more than that, they likely felt their pipe dream of a AAA game creation was successful, and that their efforts had not only been fruitful, but profitable. A talented and small team were able to sit among global franchises like Pokemon in sales. The iron was hot, and Fifth Cell wasted no time getting right back into the grind. But instead, they chose to branch off and explore a different avenue. Drawn to Life was very creative and focused on a wider audience, and the team decided to create something radically different, a real-time strategy tower defense game called Lock's Quest. Despite the radical genre shift, Lock's Quest kept many of the Telltale Fifth Cell calling cards, a detailed story, charming pixel art, etc. I personally haven't played Lock's Quest, but it's remembered with just as much fondness as Drawn to Life, even if it didn't nearly sell as well. There's a remake for it on Steam, but I'll speak about that way later on. While Fifth Cell was busy with the development of Lock's Quest, THQ came to the conclusion that the Drawn to Life franchise was simply too profitable to shelve for a year, and since they had the publishing rights, they can do whatever they wanted with the brand. THQ asked themselves a brave question: what if Spongebob?
I'm Spongebob!
Spongebob has a long storied history in video games that's still going strong to this day. So naturally, a super profitable brand like Spongebob, which THQ had the publishing rights to, and the new up-and-coming franchise. But who would develop the game? Fifth Cell was busy with Lock's Quest, so THQ had to outsource. Naturally, they linked up with Ultron. What, you don't know Ultron? Ugh, the Japanese masterminds behind Enchanted the video game on Nintendo DS, and the Jonas Brothers, also on Nintendo DS. So Ultron is a development studio that's really hard to find detailed info on, but they're mostly famous for doing licensed slop on GBA and DS. THQ chose them because they had done some kind of porting job for them in the past. Even Slaska doesn't actually know why Ultron was chosen in later interviews, but let's see what they got. So, this game I actually grew up with. I spent more time than I care to admit playing a SpongeBob crossover game, which is a really weird thing to say, let alone justify in your head. The game begins with perhaps the crustiest photos I've ever seen in the game, explaining how an artist dropped his pencils into the ocean. SpongeBob and Patrick show up in their funniest looking and sounding forms I think I've ever seen. Patrick accidentally draws Doodlebob from that one episode, and Doodlebob spares no time expanding his empire via slavery, imprisonment, and creating an army from scratch with the pencil he's taken. SpongeBob and Patrick get the idea to use the second pencil to draw a hero ready to defeat Doodlebob, which is where our player-drawn character is introduced. The guides here are ripped straight from the show and look really nice, so instead of drawing someone, I just went with Bubble Buddy. Come on, it's Bubble Buddy. Will you say no to this guy? He's gonna show up to your house if you say that. I remember I would always choose the Karen skin and then redraw it for my original Do Not Steal SpongeBob OC back in the day. The very short intro over, we jump straight into the gameplay, and dare I say it, it's actually more polished than the original Drawn to Life. So jumping and attacking feels much more responsive. You get a dedicated karate chop attack that works. Okay, it actually works. Your default moveset works for once. And your jump feels much lighter and smoother to control. There's more enemy variety, a lot of objects featured in later levels are brought earlier on, so the drawing is mostly front-loaded at the start of the game. Trying to explain, let alone demonstrate controls is difficult without having experienced it yourself, but the SpongeBob game feels so much smoother to control and play. The camera is just close enough without too much screen crunch. It feels more satisfying to jump on enemies. Things just feel more polished. Fifth Cell's engine was handed over to Ultron for development, and whatever tweaks they made to it certainly did wonders in smoothing out the issues and hiccups. The level design is radically different. There are still collectathon aspects, what with you needing to rescue 3 citizens per level, but you only need to find one throughout the level to unlock the key needed to complete it. And there's always one cage just sitting out in the open, so exploration is entirely optional. I get some people might be disappointed because of that, but it does mean there's basically no possibility of getting lost in a level or backtracking due to how simple it is. It's less of a downgrade and more of a side grade. The game's priorities are different. It's a much more condensed platforming experience. At the start of each level, you get to choose between Spongebob, Patrick, and Squidward as a recurring ally. Spongebob acts as a temporary projectile shield, while Patrick and Squidward both stun enemies, with Patrick loosely following the line you draw versus Squidward's AoE effect. Our hub world, as you might expect, is Bikini Bottom, and while it's basic, it's never not charming. We can explore the town, talk to NPCs, go to the Krusty Krab to buy upgrades and extra drawing stuff like pallets. You even have a custom home you can draw with furniture at your leisure. Actually, let's talk more about the drawing system. I don't know how to explain it, but drawing in this game feels smoother. There are some features missing from the first game, but the act of using your stylus, or mouse, feels less encumbering, more responsive. There's even some really clever expansion of the mechanic. I've already mentioned drawing your house, but there are doodled enemies that once you knock out, you get to draw them as friendly versions of themselves. It's great. There's just more things to draw past platforms. Even the bosses feel more epic and substantial. This is a very condensed adventure, however. It might shock you, I know, but SpongeBob as a brand isn't known for large-scale stories with character development. So you're solely playing this title for platforming fun, which is not a bad thing. You can easily breeze this game in about 2 afternoons, but the simpler nature of the game and the lack of long cutscenes and drama means I could just play it as a kid over and over and over again every so often. And that's what I did for years when my DS was in my permanent travel kit when going to my grandparents. It's really hard to find things to say about the game because, what do you want me to say? It's a kid's platforming game with a drawing mechanic. There's really not story to discuss here. It's entertaining to play, which is all you could ever ask for a SpongeBob game. I kind of want to check out Ultron's other titles if this one is like surprisingly competent. Maybe Phineas and Ferb on DS is the sleeper hit everyone forgot about. More interesting than SpongeBob's foray into Drawn to Life was what Fifth Cell did afterwards. THQ was pretty comfortable shopping out the IP to other developers. Fifth Cell wanted to make another entry in the franchise, however. The hero had left the village, but we all knew there was work to be done. But Fifth Cell wasn't the same small studio as they were before when they made Drawn to Life. Through multiple successful games, they began to expand and hire new people. The development pipeline became more and more comfortable with experience. Fifth Cell made a bold decision. They would actually develop 2 games at the same time. Normally, this would spell disaster for any team, to be split and having the same director working on 2 projects at the same time. But Fifth Cell had a knack to exceed expectations. Both games were planned for the Nintendo DS, and besides the Drawn to Life sequel, the other game, which I will leave mysterious for now, Slazka and co. pulled themselves by their bootstraps and went to work. Game development is already a challenging and hectic enough job as is. I couldn't imagine being in Slazka's position directing 2 games to come out in the same year. The team wanted to outdo themselves artistically, and they certainly put themselves in the hot seat for it. The team was stretched a bit thin and didn't have nearly as much room to breathe as before. But would this strategy prove fruitful? But despite being basically half dead at this point, THQ was still publishing Drawn to Life, but their next DS game was going to be published by Warner Bros. Yeah, what a great rock and hard place publisher hell to be in. Finally, in October 2009, Drawn to Life: The Next Chapter launched for DS and Wii. Yeah, there was actually 2 different versions of this game being worked on, with the Wii version being developed by Planet Moon Studios, who made all sorts of great stuff. Wonder how this game plays. Okay, so you know how the whole point of this game was to use your finger or like the touch screen, the stylus to draw stuff. You know, you have human precision. So what if we exchange that for a Wii remote that has no precision? Like this is me trying to draw stuff. So like a little smiley face. Like literally 1 minute into the game. Okay, Kirsch's gone. Let's get the eraser tool. You want to erase by waving your hand. How the entire point of this game was to use your fingers and, motion control drawing. Seems like a great idea, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. This is an awful idea. I hate everything about this. This entire game uses motion control, so it's kind of a waste of your time. Really great idea to make this game. Where'd you get it? From the Good Idea Museum? Great idea to use the goddamn Wiimote. I'm having so much fun. I spent $20 on this just for this segment. It's not even canon anyways, who cares, whatever. Let's get to the real game, shall we? Trust me when I say, you aren't ready. This sound takes me all the way back. The opening is dark, eerie, it feels like a surreal nightmare. Dark clouds shroud us, and an unknown voice begs the creator for help and guidance. We get a questionnaire asking us about that day, about what this person saw and why they left. We don't know who's talking or why, but we're instructed to draw a monster. It's all very slow, quiet, and a total change of pace than how the first game opened. A premonition of things to come. We get a fully animated intro for the first time. It's very compressed because it had to fit into the DS, but it's a testament of how much more experienced and affluent 5th Cell became after they had developed 2 games prior. Through this cinematic, we find out that Heather's speech lessons with Crazy Bark have progressed to the point she's treated as an equal and not just like a feral child, but she still has her insatiable curiosity, which leads her to activate a magical scepter she finds on the beach. Uh-oh. Predictably, Heather goes missing. Mary, now fully settled into her role as mayor after the short time period between this game and the first, really struggles to deal with finding her, but also helping the mounting problems of the people in Crunkland. She and Joey decide to summon the hero once more, which leads us to the new avatar creation system. The mannequin loses all its color and cannot be activated, which is followed by the village rapidly losing all of its color. There's only one Raposa could be behind this. Wilfrey is back and badder than ever, reveling in his evil acts, but he also talks about doing this while the world still exists, claiming to be the world's savior, and that his mission is of utmost importance. Is this generic villain talk, or perhaps something more? We don't know what Wilfrey means, but the creator does, because he speaks directly to him. The creator, God, says Wilfrey will not have him, whoever that is, and that he will fight back and win. Wilfrey seems to know exactly what the creator is talking about, saying that the creator only cares for him and not the Raposa or Wilfrey himself, which inspires Wilfrey to fly into a rage and use his new scepter to suck the villagers into various portals, sending them creator knows where. Everyone we spent all that time to rescue is thrown out like trash, with Wilfrey taking direct control over Heather, but not before she drops a pendant for Joey to pick up. The only survivors of this attack are Mary, Joey, Isaac the shopkeeper, a single Raposa child, the pirate, Crazy Barks, Mike, and the caribou. The flame has been snuffed out and has lost its color. Everything around them is fading, becoming uninhabitable, forcing them to leave. All seems lost when they're stranded on the docks without any way to escape, but Mary places her faith with the Creator and prays with the Book of Life for a way out, and the Creator listens. A giant whale housing an entire separate town on its back rolls up, allowing the survivors to ride it safely, but also having it act as their new town. They have to leave their homes behind and completely put their trust in the Creator. This is an incredible opening. We're presented with so many mysteries within the first 15 minutes that it's staggering, but not impossible to keep up with. The entire opening segment isn't really explained. Wilfrey's plan has a lot of factors we don't really understand. There's holes that are going to be filled in later. The village, something we spent the entire last game building up and restoring to its former glory, has lost all of its color in the blink of an eye, with most of its population scattered by the devil. With no home left to return to, the remaining few prayed for safety and were rewarded with a new home adrift at sea, a symbolic fleeing of the tribe of Israel. It's an opening of literal biblical proportions, and while its length might be a bit tedious to its target audience of young kids, it's something that I've grown to appreciate all the more at my current age. The new town has everything the remaining few need: a town hall, homes, even a creation hall. Mary and Joey are overwhelmed, and they use the Book of Life to bring the hero back, but in a new body. The new character creation screen is an exceptional, objective improvement over the first game. Not only is everything from the first game brought back, it's given a new fresh coat of paint. The touchscreen feels so much smoother to interact with. Straight lines have never been easier to draw. You can draw with a pencil or a brush tool for the first time. There's a much wider array of colors on each palette. There's an entire section where you can add and remove individual limbs. Each body proportion can be altered in size. These are no simple changes. These features are excellent strides in making your custom avatar feel totally unique. It's such an important facelift. Everything here feels balanced and tested and quality. This and the opening are such powerful standout moments, amplified by Fifth Cell's new abilities after working on 2 previous games. A true reflection of everything they've learned from the first installment, and then some. The avatars did kind of look all the same in the first game because you have a far more rigid base to work off of, but that's all unlocked here. You don't even have to give your characters 2 legs or arms, you can mismatch as you please. It's so much more creatively enabled by simple virtue of more options. The character bases return, along with some new ones, but I want to create my avatar the same way I would when I was 9 years old. I either lost or sold my original DS copy years ago, but the memories, however vague, are still somewhere inside me. Meet Samael, a name meaning poison of God. He isn't a figure present in the Bible, most angels, at least named ones, aren't, but he's featured in some extra canonical works like the Book of Enoch, which is something that really deserves its own video whenever I talk about El Shaddai. Samael in popular culture is treated as either a fallen angel or an angel willing to do God's dirty work, so to speak, often characterized as Death himself. I chose this name because the situation requires someone who's not afraid to get his hands dirty. Right after we are created, or resummoned or whatever, we get thrown into the tutorial level to retrieve Heather's pendant, which was dropped on the ground. Right off the bat, everything feels so much smoother. I feel far more agile, but also precise. The controls feel more responsive, sharper. I felt like hitting enemies and narrowly avoiding being hit is something I have total control of, rather than just being along for the ride like the first installment. The issue of the platforming and hit detection being janky feels like it's completely gone. Not once did I feel like I was unfairly hit by something, or missed a jump that wasn't my fault. I'm not sure exactly what they changed or really how to show the differences side by side without you knowing how both games perform. It just feels different. There isn't a noticeable change in how fast you run, but so much time you spent waiting in syrup water or tight jumps is eliminated. Water physics are totally functional and feel just fine. Attacking always hits its mark and never feels like you have to fight with the buttons, it's just better. I will say that jumping feels quite a lot heavier, not to the point of it being a flaw, but I did have to adapt to the new physics just a little bit. Even the ground pound works better. We have a dedicated attacking button that doesn't suck. Everything is such a vast improvement. I don't have to dread platforming anymore. Levels have a sort of dynamic camera that scales back when needed, so screen crunch as an issue has been eliminated entirely. I actually like moving around in this game. You know how each world in the first game had a unique way of movement and unique weapon? That's all been entirely reworked. There are 3 permanent weapons you can cycle through in a dedicated menu by holding the L button. The sword works similarly to the sword in the first game, but on crack. I mean, look at this thing. You can upgrade the slash 3 times in rapid succession, which can very easily be spammed and have you running through levels like a poor man's Zero. Through the blaster, which fires straight shots that can be upgraded to shoot out faster, or the yo-yo, which allows you to hit in front of you diagonally or by pressing the D-pad while attacking 360 degrees. Each weapon can be bought and upgraded in Isaac's shop, and fully upgrading each weapon will cost you enough coins to ensure you play the entire game to do so. Each weapon starting out is dirt cheap, but their highest peak of upgrade is expensive. While a lot less unique than the first game, it functions a lot more and allows you to choose a preferred playstyle. Very rarely are there instances where one weapon is objectively better than the other. That only happens sometimes. I use the sword for my playthrough, but the blaster is my go-to for a lot of boss fights. The yo-yo, well, I left that thing behind. The 360-degree move is nice, but it isn't powerful enough to keep up with the spamming sword slash. Each weapon still feels useful, and having the freedom to choose whatever one you want first and cycling through them adds a lot more replay value. I do admire their ambition in the first installment and feel like the change makes it a lot more generic, but I'd rather have something that, while is not nearly as inspired, functions consistently. If I ever have to use that snowball launching gun ever again, man! Once we retrieve the pendant, we all gather in the map room to figure out how exactly we're going to save the village. Suddenly, the pendant fires a beam from it that circles a specific point on the world map, giving us a location to go to. But not until the next morning. Mary lacks some of the confidence to be an effective leader, while Joey remains faithful and optimistic. Their secret beach is gone, but the view they get out here isn't much different. Joey was very much a supporting character in the first game, someone who had to be kind of babysat and looked after. But he's matured and is someone who Mary places far more trust and confidence in, reflected in the theme that plays during the scene. It's called Joey and Mary. The usage of "and" denotes them as equals, but it's also flipped. It went from Mary plus Joey to Joey and Mary, putting Joey in front, perhaps a premonition of things to come. Whoa, buddy! Once we awake, we enter the town of Watersong, which has gone under a similar fate as Crunkland. We find a jar of what looks like pure color, which allows us to color in buildings to restore them to their proper glory. Every time you beat a level, you gain a certain amount of color, which allows you to restore more of the land, with each chunk costing a specific amount of it. It's really satisfying to color in the buildings and gradually explore more and more of each location. I'll spoil it right now and say there are multiple different hubs you visit throughout, but they're all structured the same way. They all have a sort of storybook layout, with each location sort of popping out of book pages. No matter what screen you're on, the very southern point always has a dock back to your turtle village, so returning back for something is no sweat. It's very unique and makes the adventure feel like a true fable. There are around 7 to 8 levels per area, but you're given a lot of freedom to explore whatever ones you want first. There will be an introduction level, but you can hop around those and choose between 2 to 3 each hub, each granting a different amount of color droplets. Stages have been developed with this in mind, so difficulty isn't always ramping up linearly, but instead each level has a gimmick or two. Think of it like Mega Man, where some levels are harder than others, but the freedom to choose which ones you want to play first still works because it's all around the same difficulty. It doesn't spike that much between them. It's just certain elements you might find harder or more enthralling than others. The lack of a map is not an issue for this game at all because it's far more linear, with branching paths being far briefer and only providing extra coins, color droplets, and these giant coins for a bonus. Watersong is a fun first hub. It's modeled after Venice, I believe, and takes a lot of inspiration from the high society crowds of France and Italy. The people there are haughty and a little pompous, but mean well. Aside from their color problem, their Maya Rosa has been short of words as of recent, which could really mean anything. So we have to beat enough levels to earn enough color droplets to restore the gondola ride. When you get into the thick and thin of the levels themselves, you'll notice that one of my biggest complaints, the repetitive nature of the drawing mechanic, has been addressed. The amount of drawable objects has been scaled back significantly, with each level having a maximum of 2. And to boot, most of these objects actually have individual guides you can follow if you so choose. So players who struggle with drawing or simply don't want to draw can just have a button to press to move on, even if that means flying in the face of the biggest gameplay draw in exchange for just keeping the momentum going. And the things required to draw aren't just various platforms. We have rings that fire us in certain directions. You can draw environmental objects like birds, even new forms for the hero, but I'll save that for later. My personal favorite examples are these. These are the alter segments, action drawing, where you enter to draw lines to get across wide gaps in a level, but you only have a certain amount of lines to draw, and some of them have properties that make them fall upon contact or they're bouncy. These act as a puzzle segment. You have to be creative to get across some of these. This is an awesome use of the DS's touchscreen while keeping the drawing mechanics alive, but not running into the repetitive issue of the first game. It feels satisfying to get the solution right, especially without using all the available resources. It makes you feel clever. Some of these segments get pretty tricky later on too. There are definitely ways to cheese these segments, but doing that is entirely dependent on you. Depending how smart you are, these segments can be over in 5 seconds or 15 minutes. Since you don't have to draw nearly as many objects as the first game, I can see how some people would see that as a downgrade or disappointment of sorts, like a step back for the creative aspect. But the pace platforming experience Fifth Cell made is not just competent, but very enjoyable and fun. They did their homework for this and made some really engaging levels, especially towards the end. There are actual unique enemies for each location. No longer do you have to fight just Baki and the shadow creatures. Each place has unique enemies you have to deal with in a specific way. Take these statues for example. You can't harm them at all, instead you have to dodge them and let them run into a wall or fall off a cliff. It's simple stuff, but it keeps level progression fresh and never stale. Once we collect enough of the paint drops to enter the second part of town, we have to break up a scuffle between this kid, Miles, and this creepy Raposa named Salem. The two have some legendary beef. But honestly, I support Salem. This kid. I mean, look at his whole Phantom of the Opera getup. How much more cartoonishly evil can you get? Miles is less grateful to be saved than he is panicked to find something called the conch, and rushes off. He runs into... No. Okay. So, this guy's named Sock. And if you know, you know. But for now, this guy just kind of shows up and tags along for the adventure. He's like a Joey for Joey. Joey's comic relief who's there for moral support. No one questions him, and he kinda just tags along with us. But he's chill. We have to split the group up. While we beat more levels, I presume Joey and Sock are smoking a bowl or something. Mary meets the mayor of the town, Rose, but she doesn't seem to be able to respond to Mary. That's because she's become mute after she foolishly accepted a wager from Salem. You see, Rose is both the mayor and a superb opera singer with an unmatched voice, and when Salem challenges her, her pride is wounded and she accepts the wager. As you might expect, she lost, and the price of said wager is her voice, because they both bet on something called a promise conch, which sanctifies their bet by being unbreakable unless they retrieve that conch. Miles, that kid from before, is her troubled son, who has worked himself day and night to try and find the conch to restore his mother's voice. Salem is a Mephistopheles-like figure, preying on people's pride by constructing dastardly wages and offers that ends up hurting people in the end. Without Rose's ability to lead, the village has fallen into disrepair and has lost a lot of its color. Until we came along. Rose has largely given up and become resigned, but Mary urges her to continue fighting, because Mary knows the stress of being a mayor from the lessons her father gave her. This was already a theme established in the first game, but I want to spotlight it here. Leadership is a critically important theme that is consistently presented throughout the series. Winding back to the first game, our examples are the mayor and Mary. The mayor is the rock of his community, rarely ever faltering, compared to Mary, who is filled with self-doubt and doesn't always make the best decisions, frequently becoming overwhelmed. The largest difference between the two is that Mayor is faithful to the creator and draws strength from his faith for the villagers, versus Mary, who often storms off and remains alone when pressed and calls for the creator for the confidence to perform. It's not that Mary is wrong for doing this, but rather she unintentionally puts her own feelings above the needs and wants of the people she has to manage, which proves to be her most crucial flaw. The mayor is able to push past his own wants for his people, which is the lesson he imparts to his daughter before he passes. Think about it like this. You don't pray to God for success, you pray to God for wisdom and faith to earn success. Knowing this, Mary is able to push aside these feelings for now and act as she needs to. She becomes more stoic, determined, and only shows her vulnerabilities to Joey, her closest advisor. She's using her skills to help a fellow mayor, but without her voice, we really don't know much about Rose's leadership style, aside from her pride being her main flaw. I'll circle back to this once we collect the conch. Finding said conch might seem impossible, but the devil always reveals himself when you call his name. Salem turns up again to taunt us, but he inadvertently leaves behind a vital clue. Stuck to his foot is a piece of seaweed only found in the darkest abyss of town, so we head off to find the conch at last. Once we pull it up, the creator undoes the promise, and Rose is able to speak again. While she's thankful for all of her hard work, she's filled with regret and shame for her failure as a leader. and as penance, she is planning to abdicate her role as mayor and pass it on to her son. This might not sound serious, we've seen this before, but for Watersong, the mayors have a unique voice that, if passed on at all, means their death. Rose is planning on dying and forcing responsibility on her son.
Which is an insane plan.
Rose can't deal with the shame she feels, so she wants to run away from it by essentially taking her own life. Mary is horrified to hear this, but nothing she can say can convince Rose. Later that night, Rose invites Miles into the garden to pass on her voice and anoint him as the mayor. And we get to hear that song she sings, called Light of My Life. Damn. For this moment, David J. Franco went all out. He got the singer Haley Chipman for the vocals, and even for compressed Nintendo DS sounds, it sounded excellent. It's such a bittersweet, dour song about passing on your legacy to your spouse. Even if it's at the end of your life, you can die happy holding on to the memories of your descendant, knowing that the world is in their good hands. It's a moment that's bound to reignite the painful memories of anyone who's ever lost a family member, resurfacing all those feelings. It certainly did for Mary, because I know I keep repeating the fact she's insecure, but this moment sends her absolutely over the edge. It reminds her of her dead father, and it inadvertently preys on how she feels about her village, wiped out under her leadership. The song is tragic and beautiful and heartbreaking all at the same time, which is an insane accomplishment for a children's game. I don't have any children, but I have no shame when I say this scene made me nervous for when I do. Death is something I still can't really wrap my head around. What is it like to be dead? Is it just sleeping forever? Will I end up a proud parent when my time to be with God comes? It's a question that will keep me up at night and colors how I view every single day of my life in a way. How am I going to die? Will I be fortunate enough to have a large living family? There are so few other moments in any game I've ever played, or book I've ever read, or movie I've ever seen that I've ever experienced something that's made me question my own existence like this. And I doubt I'm alone. I know that at least some of you who've played this as kids probably have lumps in your throat and tears in your eyes. It's okay. I'm here. This is my favorite moment in the franchise. Straight up, no questions asked. Exceptional. Exemplary. Perfect. When Rose finishes her song, nothing happens. She doesn't know why, but the creator does. The creator, God, intervenes and tells her, no, you will not die here today. Plain as can be, no questions asked, no interpretation. Rose's actions were denied by the creator because the best thing she can do is to not take the easy way out and give up on her life, but live with the consequences and strive to redeem herself by becoming a stronger, more capable person and leader in spite of her flaws. When you try and chart out a course for your own life, the creator's plans take center stage, and his plans for Rose and Miles is to have her stay around and continue to lead. It's interesting that the creator chose to intervene right here, because there are a lot of dire moments where he also could have done so, but the Reposes don't fully understand the creator's plan, just as people don't entirely know God's plan. But what little we do know is that he wants the best possible outcome for us, always. Rose's leadership is marked by pride and shame, which hold her back from being an ideal leader. But once those are corrected, she is capable and caring and collected, traits she will pass down to Miles when her time comes, whenever it may be. This won't be a scene I just remember every so often throughout my life. I think it's going to evolve with me as I age. Will I think about this somewhere in the future, in the deep recesses of my mind, when my time to leave comes? Sorry for getting too real there, folks. Let's move on. Let's put a meme.
What? Gen Z's trying to what? Cancel.
Wilfrey.
Gen Z's trying to cancel.
Wilfrey.
Honey, that's cute.
Salem is not too pleased to see Rosa, alive or not, and enacts his plan. Did I forget to mention? I cheated. To no one's surprise, Salem was Wilfrey all along. He leaves to go do something dastardly and leaves a subordinate, Bockybeard, to invade as a plan B for our first boss battle. He's a giant ghost version of the Baki enemies, and he's really easy, as expected for the first boss. He's not really the tension finisher singing scene was. He's mostly just there to have a boss fight at the end. All is well and Watersong is saved. Rosa, Miles, and the rest are eternally thankful for our help. But we must continue on in order to find a solution to save our own village. Or just find it in general. It's kind of understated, but everyone is sorta lost at sea and just blindly following Heather's pendant. So even if they were to collect enough paint drops to restore every island, they still have to find their village, as well as find the other villagers. Oh yeah, the other villagers. Each time we enter a new town, we get a small scene of some of the Reposes being sent there. There are a couple levels where we can rescue them, but honestly, it's not very rewarding. As far as I know, finding people just has them stand in one spot and dispense some repetitive dialogue. How the game factors these characters being optional is that they just don't show up for story scenes at all, at least to my knowledge. I really hope you like Isaac the Pirate Guy and Crazy Barks, because that's your main villager cast. Oh yeah, Sock's coming with us too. This is an area where you can definitely tell development was rushed. Most villagers weren't fleshed out characters, but still had a unique role. Here they feel even more tertiary, less like real people, Reposes, and just background fixtures. The sense of community and belonging from the first game is gone, which I suppose makes sense in universe, but it's still disappointing to me. We've seen this song and dance before with Mary and Joey, but this time, Joey has a plan. He's done being a passive observer to Mary's suffering. With the promise conch in hand, he promises to protect and serve Mary for as long as he's alive. He throws the conch into the ocean, because he never intends to break the promise he made. It's such a powerful declaration of devotion and love, and it floors Mary into silence. Joey stood on business here, and he really meant that. What a king. The next day, Mary mysteriously goes missing. No one really knows where she is, which is concerning because they're surrounded by the ocean, so the only reason she isn't on the ship, or Turtle, is because she's... No, that's ridiculous. Joey isn't humoring that, instead assuming Wilfrey came along in the middle of the night and sucked her up in a portal. For now, he assumes command of the villagers, and we head off to the next location the pendant shows us, Lava Stream. This is a huge vibe shift for the game. Mary was groomed to be mayor her entire life, but now that she's gone, Joey, who has only ever supported her, has to shoulder all of that responsibility himself. Sock becomes his main hype man, confiding with him personally. Joey blames himself for potentially driving her away, but Sock reveals a scant bit of his backstory, about how he was once in Joey's position, traveling the world in search for someone he loved, so he can empathize with Joey's pain. From then on, the two become an inseparable team. We arrive at Lava Stream, a volcanic mining town where men and women alike are worked to the bone by a delusional tyrant king named Miney. Despite most of the town losing its color, Miney doesn't care because he commands an army of robots that follow his every word. He doesn't send the robots, who have no free will and who don't get tired, to mine the Banya crystal he needs for his economy, but rather the people who built the robots get sent into the infinite slave labor. Lava Stream is a complete contrast to Watersong. Watersong was very high society and relaxed, while Lava Stream is very working class and busy, with everyone having very common names and dressed in hard hats and whatnot. If you choose to complete all the levels in Watersong, you will have a ton of extra color droplets to color in a lot of white spaces almost right away. You still need to complete several levels to progress and get more color, but you are rewarded for beating each level by being able to fast track everything. Is there a reward for coloring in all the white spaces? Actually, I don't know. I remember coloring everything in all 4 hubs and not getting anything. So it's up to you, really. The levels here are more of what you would expect, but we find something new halfway. We obtain a new form called the Blob form, which allows you to access tight spaces you wouldn't otherwise fit in. It's just the morph ball from Metroid. But unlike just crouching down, you have access to your forms in a menu by holding the R button and waiting for it to activate, so it doesn't feel nearly as snappy and quick as the morph ball. It's kinda sluggish. And all of that just to move slowly and squeeze through a crevice to activate a switch or something. Since you obtain this form so early, most of the levels in this hub have several moments where you have to select the form, then slowly inch your way across. It's just boring and doesn't activate my almonds. It does get far more interesting later on, but for now, it's just making every level really slow. The multiple forms is a great way to encourage people's creativity in drawing, though. You can decide not only how you look as a default, but for 2 other forms you can swap between on the fly. Even if the blob segments aren't super engaging to me, I still liked the process of designing it. There are far more creative ways to draw in Next Chapter with gameplay applications that aren't limited to interactable objects that basically all platforming games have. Oh, hi Mary. She's just wandering around and she sees us, but runs away. Like she's avoiding us. We know that Wilfrey can transform into other people, so perhaps this is a trick. We don't find her in the caves, but we do find this guy, Mo, who worked on all the robots. He explains that the king, his brother, started listening to the bad advice of a Raposa named Salem, and declared himself king, exiled most of his family, and turned his village into a communist slave state to dig up resources and use the robots meant for labor as his police force. Miney has gone completely power mad and won't listen to reason, with his own brother losing faith in him. We create a plan to collectively turn off all the robots at once by crafting a key and placing it into the master control panel. That doesn't go so well because Miney finds out pretty much instantly, and we get locked in a tower. Joey evades the robots and considers trying to break us out, but realizes we can probably just do it ourselves. Which is very true. We burst out of the tower and use the key we forged to shut off all the robots, and Miney isn't too happy, but he runs into Salem, who basically just calls him stupid and reveals that there was a secret project that even the king didn't use, a giant robot hidden within the production factory. Miney falls to his knees, realizing the error of his ways now that no one is on his side. Naturally, we have to deal with that giant robot, which makes up our second boss fight. So Beard took about 2 minutes. This giant robot here took about 10 to 15. Let me explain. The robot has 3 phases, and by that I mean you have to deplete his health bar 3 times to win the fight. The first phase has him smashing the platforms you're standing on. Oh, and you have to hit his hands. His other attack is hiding in the background and releasing a punch that rockets him to the foreground so hard it cracks your screen. You have to make sure you don't get hit in either of these attacks, otherwise the robot becomes invincible and you have to wait for the next opening. Once that health bar is gone, he sucks you into his body and you have to complete a short platforming segment and then destroy a core. You get spat out and onto the next phase, which plays exactly the same as the last one, which means this boss really just has 2 whole attacks that you need to work around for 3 health bars. I don't know if the AI just freaked out and didn't show me, but why wouldn't they give this guy an extra harder attack after each phase? It's so repetitive and loses its luster right away. Even the dreariest of Mario games have some bosses with some kind of rage attack or something to spice up the encounter just before you win. It's a really baffling choice and seriously cripples what could have been a much more interesting fight, turning it into a checklist of waiting to be sucked inside the robot to actually win the fight. These cores, I think they're supposed to be eyes, are a lot more interesting. There's missiles being fired at you constantly, and the eye shoots its own projectiles, so you need to always be dodging and then find your opening to hit them. The gun is without question the only weapon you should be using. It allows you to fire from a safe distance while just jumping out of the way out of the projectiles. It's much simpler. I will note that this fight is incredibly generous, that if you die at any point in later phases, you respawn on the same phase with full health. Oh, did I mention there's no lives in this game? Those got completely removed. There's no game overs either. After the last phase, we rupture the heart and win the fight. Miney apologizes to his slave subjects and blames himself for listening to the outrageous advice of Wilfrey, and his civvies kinda just say, don't worry about it, bro. And just as quickly as we entered Lava Stream, we left. And I have some thoughts about it. Lava Stream only took me an hour to fully 100%. To enter, complete the story, to color in 100% of the town. 1 hour. It's a lot shorter than Water Song, and it seriously lacks the emotional punches it had, especially considering how good the end of the first location was. I don't know why they didn't punch as hard here. I know they're capable of it just doesn't have a lot of story stuff to do here. Miney's story is about a mayor who becomes overwhelmed about a resource crisis and becomes a tyrant king, abusing his powers to ensure his nation's economy, but sacrificing the people and their happiness in the process. He's meant to show that despite being his nation's leader, having unlimited power to command people is a privilege that must be wielded with honor and carefully thought. It just lacks any powerful moments that Rose and Miles had. It feels very bog standard. Not a lot happens. We see Mary once and she vanishes into thin air. Salem's interactions with Miney just don't have that evil, personal sting like they did beforehand. The only interesting character moments in this whole chapter come before and after Lava Stream Village. Speaking of Mary, she suddenly comes back. She's looking for something really intently when Joey stumbles across her journey. Understandably, he's confused with her, but she just asks to see the Book of Life that Joey kept on him since she left. She wrestles it from his hands and starts tearing out all the pages, trying to destroy the book. She warns Joey to go home, to give up on trying to save their village and everyone else, which does little to dismay a panicked and distraught Joey. Mike, as he tends to do, awkwardly inserts himself into a situation, which makes Mary fly into a rage. She really hates Mike for some reason. We try and confront her about what's going on, but she flies through one of Wilfrey's portals and leaves us once again. This is devastating. The Book of Life, the thing we worked so hard to protect in the first game, that the mayor and Mary guarded with their lives, is torn up by Mary herself. The townspeople have an incredibly bad reaction to this. They're upset with Joey for failing to guard the book and for trying to defend Mary's honor, but they're fed up with Mary, immediately condemning her as a traitor, even condemning her to death. Joey's losing his mind trying to justify why Mary would suddenly turn her back on everyone. But Mike, of all people, tells everyone to have hope, because while dozens of its pages are torn, the book itself is still in their possession. A lot of people might suggest that Wilfrey might be keeping her hostage and he's simply disguising himself as Mary, but Wilfrey simply can't help himself. He always reveals himself, even if unintentionally. Would he really be able to mimic the way Mary speaks to Joey? This is such a stressful sequence, but we're forced to just watch, because the hero is largely a passive observer to it all. We're about halfway through the game, and we've just continued to lose things. We lost the village, most of the people in it. Now Mary and now the Book of Life. But we've made new friends. Watersong and Lava Stream have been saved by us, and we've gained Sock as a trusted new companion. And why exactly does Mary hate Mike so much? Is she a racist? We return to the gloomy opening sequence. The same voice as before pleads for the creator to save him and have him return, which I'm going to assume can only really mean Joey in this context. The voice keeps being fed questions about what happened that day, a day we still know nothing about or who it's about. Joey is a strong candidate for being that person in question, but the narrator and the specifics about that date are unknown. On the hidden beach, Heather is staring into the darkness. Joey goes to meet her, but she turns to stone before his very eyes, because it's all a dream. Through this, Joey's become a card-carrying member of Tony Soprano's Traumatic Symbolic Dream Club. This kid has had it rough, man. No parents, the love of his life potentially betraying him, and the Raposa who was basically his disabled sister being kidnapped, your entire village no longer trusting you.
That's brutal. He's gonna be stuck in a Mexican shack like the Ralph retort soon.
But Joey doesn't give up. He knows the odds have been stacked even further against him, but he doesn't let it stop him. He refuses to give up and let Wilfrey win, at least not without a fight. This inspires the people to continue on, to not lose hope and faith as they reach the third hub, the democracy of the Republic of the People of the United Space Fortress, or the Galactic Jungle. As the name might suggest, the Galactic Jungle is a mix of primitive and advanced. The first screen is a rainforest encased in classic sci-fi bubbles, and the second screen stretches all the way up to space, filled with asteroids, stars, metal ridges to walk on. The weird name it has is because this place is not ruled by one all-powerful leader making all the decisions, but rather a council of wise Raposas who decided to make all the laws. And if you don't obey them, their elite task force will instantly arrest you and take you...
I don't know, we never see any of these people ever again. I don't know. They kill you?
It's basically what every first world country has, and even has lockdown laws. Aside from the colorlessness, the biggest issue with the area is that no one has actually ever seen the council, only being represented by this sniveling Raposa named Click, who is obsessed with paperwork and bureaucracy. Not exactly a subtle jab. All of the levels here have a really nice sci-fi aesthetic, these big metal pipes, trees encased in bubbles, the vacuum of space, tight metal corridors. It's a nice change of pace. This level is also host to your second form, the Spider. This one can obviously crawl on walls and other surfaces, but also has a web shooting function that can disable enemies and turn them into crawlable surfaces. This is all used to great effect when the level requires you to move vertically without any platforms, and how do you choose to get up there is up to you. Will you take the long route and safely crawl up, or spray the duck shooting at you to cut time and make platforms? I'm a huge fan of this. It really spices up the gameplay and allows you to be creative with how you choose to progress. It's a lot more fun than the blob form, at least. But now that we have all of our extra forms, the level design incorporates them all at the same time. So rather than just running about and slaughtering Baki, there's a healthy balance of precision platforming. At this point in the game, the action drawing segments have become far more complicated. Gone are the days of simple black lines covering wide gaps. You have to work around floating and falling platforms as well as bouncing ones. Some rooms must be completed with two different drawing segments, one where you draw what you need to activate a switch and the other just to reach the door needed to move on. I remember a few of these being tricky as a kid. Not so much anymore, obviously. We also get to design a spaceship for some arcadey shooting segments. We spend a lot of time on the ground level trying to make the necessary parts to make the elevator work and go meet the council. But as democracy tends to demonstrate, there's always a holdup. We're ever so close to meeting the council, but the other elevator we need needs to be powered by 3 separate generators, which are at the end of 3 different levels. If Click doesn't figure this shit out, I am going to whoop his ass. You would have to complete the levels anyways, but I like that the foot-dragging, patronizing nature of democracy is here with no punches pulled. I'm just saying a bribery-based, completely corrupt society is a lot more fun than everyone actually having equal opportunities and rights and having to wait in line. Come on, I'm Canadian, I have to deal with that stuff already. Once you power all 3 generators, Click apparently got banished from the Galactic Jungle for entering the council room without permission. Where did he get banished to? The vacuum of space? There's technically nothing preventing us from just walking through the front doors of the council building. Except for this random boss fight that comes straight out of nowhere. These ships are called King and Queen. Who are they? What are they? I don't know, but I guess we have to deal with them? It's the easiest, most brainless shmup encounter you will ever have in your entire life, and I still don't really know why it just shows up like that. No council summoning, Sock and Joey just see this thing in the distance and figure, alright, shoot it down. After that very tepid boss encounter, we get into the building and run into the police force. But it turns out the actual number of officers has been drastically inflated by holograms, with only 1 out of 10 officers being real. The council's propaganda and intimidation tactics extend so far that no one knows their task force is almost entirely fabricated. Once we get inside, we find out there's actually no council at all. The image of the Raposas sitting in the chairs is misleading, because they're actually dummies. The council is completely fake, hidden behind the command of a suspended head inside of a giant emerald tube. But even that is proven to be another farce, because the man behind the curtain, the one truly pulling the strings, is Click himself. So the scoop here is that the previous mayor died, but left no heir, so Click panicked and set up this insane system to keep everyone in line, and things just really got out of hand. Naturally, he listened to Wilfrey's advice and built a space station and set up not only a fake government, but a Wizard of Oz-style last line of defense just in case that fake government got found out. So Click picked a whole bouquet of oopsie daisies. But we have to help him get out of this situation before the natives he's subjugated don't tear him apart like a rack of ribs. Both King Miney and Click went a step up from mayor and became something worse. Miney is a tyrant king, and Click setting up a totalitarian state ruled by fear and a literal puppet government. Miney at least had family in Lava Stream who somewhat liked him, but Click is just some guy who took over and has been imprisoning and ruling over the population with fear. And let's not forget about the structure of the galactic jungle. The people at the bottom levels are stereotypical natives with grass skirts and face paint. They speak in simple sentences, while Click, and presumably everyone else at the top level, is educated and closer to the Raposa we're familiar with. Even when he's exposed, the people willingly elect Click as mayor. Why would you trust him? What? This guy's gonna kill you! Kill him! Eat his bones! So, the types of leadership criticized here so far have all had one thing in common. They all listened or were influenced by Wilfrey, or Salem, Wilfrey in disguise. Wilfrey exploited Rosa's pride, Miney's anxiety over resource management, and Click's desire to provide a stable life for a town in ruin, turning them into different, flawed examples of leadership. Some of the puzzle pieces are adding up here. If Mary has truly changed sides and is allied with Wilfrey, what did he exploit with her? He doesn't seem to force compliance, he only coerces based on Raposa's inner desires. So what did Mary see in him to flip sides? When we all get back to the Turtle Village, we all realize that we've been going in circles. We're helping other villages, but we're nowhere close to finding Mary or Heather or any of our friends. This would be a great time to have any of the optional villagers you've been able to save show up, but there is no moment like that. It's treated like you haven't found anyone at all. It's a shame. I wish there was some kind of optional scene showing the extras, but we just don't get that. To make things worse, Heather's pendant, which was responsible for charting these places out on the map, has stopped working. It's not that Joey was able to control it so much as the pendant was just doing that on its own. So it going dim is a huge concern and very demoralizing. Joey gives the pendant to Sock to try and figure it out. Things somehow get even worse when the pirate guy realizes that they've reached uncharted territories, meaning that turning back and simply relocating might be the safe option to save themselves. Mike trusts Joey's judgment, but the others are completely fed up and accuse Joey of being compromised by Wilfrey. Bitter arguments take center stage, which cloaks Sock's escape. Joey eventually notices his absence and tries to find him. Sock throws the pendant off the turtle and into the sea.
Stop calling me Sock!
There was no Sock all along. The entire time we've met him, Sock was Wilfrey in disguise. Every moment we shared, however funny, however private, intimate, it was all fake. Wilfrey invented someone from scratch. His backstory was fake. His devotion and friendship to Joey and us were fake. They were a tool Wilfrey used to both spy on us and simply because he felt like breaking our hearts again. Think about it. Whenever Wilfrey, disguised as Salem or not, has been on screen, has Sock ever been there? We never questioned it, because it was just Sock. The comic relief. How could he? This is such a heartbreaking, earth-shattering, powerful moment. Someone we met and grew to cherish and trust has been revealed as not only a liar, but the enemy we've been working against the whole time, simply posing as a friend out of sheer cruelty and malice. Wilfrey might seriously be one of the most evil villains I've ever seen. All he does is lead people astray in the most personal, damning ways possible, a kind of manipulation that fills you with self-loathing and contempt because you fell for it. Everyone just gives up. Without much of a book of life, no pendant, they're lost adrift at sea. They just simply can't beat Wilfrey. They've been outwit and overpowered, and it's time to return to the remains of their home. We just lost. Wilfrey is an excellent representation of the devil, using his cunning to trick people into doing his bidding before he even lifts a finger. But the thing is with the devil is that he will always appear if you call his name, and he always leaves clues behind. Joey has another traumatizing dream. He dreams about Mary and Heather, about how he's failed to protect them. But the creator speaks to Joey. You are almost out of time. Someone on the turtle knows where to go, but we must find him first. Scarby's Ark is our only hint at who it is.
Someone cut this kid a break. Joey's like 16, he can't even sleep without horrifically depressing nightmares about God and his failures to save the people he most cares about.
Being informed on what to do via dreams might seem silly, but dreams are just one of the ways the creator interacts with people. The Book of Daniel has a lot of references to dreams and their interpretations, and luckily for the Reposes, this dream happens to be quite literal. Joey goes around asking if the words Scarby's Ark have any relevance, but he notices Wilfrey's hat was left behind. Crazy Barks is using it as a sail, but the hat is blowing opposite of the wind. And that's when Joey figures out that Scarby's Ark is just Crazy Barks backwards. Wilfrey's hat points towards his castle, because his evil nature defies all of the creator's creations, including the very wind. With that in mind, the ship is turned around, and we head to the final hub. Crazy Barks, knowing all of this, is left very ambiguous, but he's always been a very useful character. He taught Heather how to speak, and now he has become a destiny sail, in his own words. He speaks gibberish and the other Reposes don't really understand him, but his actions speak louder than words. Tension is still high. The pirate guy goes around pinching people because he's so paranoid that Wilfrey could be anyone. The sense of community and trust is completely gone here, and your party members don't really like each other that much. Joey is desperate. Mike has no clue what's going on, and the pirate guy, I just remembered his name is Pirate Beard, I think, suspects everyone, and Isaac the shopkeep is done with everyone's BS. Crazy Barks is chill though. We arrive at Wilfrey's wasteland. It's almost entirely whited out, and what little that can be seen is assets from other worlds crudely stitched together. Water Song, Lava Stream, and Galactic Jungle are sewn together haphazardly, with their respective NPCs quietly looking upon you, with no dialogue. We barely have time to talk until Mary shows up. The real Mary. Joey and the crew are so broken that they refuse to believe it's her until Wilfrey shows up and backs up her claims. There's no more doubt. Mary betrayed us for Wilfrey. She doesn't gloat about it. She doesn't even look too happy. She looks quite dour, actually. She speaks about how she has a higher purpose as a mayor, and that her decision to side with Wilfrey is the right thing to do. And from that, the bond between her and Joey is completely severed. Joey no longer trusts or even likes Mary. He's done with her and the village, and can only trust us and the creator. The more color we restore, the more upset Mary and Wilfrey become. I'm confused why the promise conch didn't go off at the beginning.
because it's here when Joey and Mary's relationship is altered forever. We never get to see them become friends to lovers. Those two are done. Mary still refuses to speak about the higher purpose she was allegedly called for that led her to Wilfrey, the devil, the one who killed her father. Whatever it was, it must have been so important that she was willing to overlook that, which drives Joey up the wall. He's enraged and heartbroken and crushed that Mary would turn her back on her people and abandon them for a purpose she won't even explain. And he's right. Mary left like a thief in the night, leaving Joey to shoulder the entire community by himself. She actively ruined them and destroyed everything she could by tearing apart the Book of Life, by warping her position as a leader to lead them astray. Literally doing the devil's bidding. Mary decides it's time to show Joey why she's done all these things, but he won't listen. He doesn't even care anymore. He and Mary are done. The dialogue here is simple but so effective. Mary tries her best to be calm and rational, and Joey is full of pain and rage and has tossed aside so many memories that they were present for in the first game. Everyone who played this series wanted to see the two get together and be happy, but their lives are going in such different trajectories that that's no longer possible. Wilfrey has to outright kidnap him to show why Mary made these decisions. But even after everyone retreats after Joey's taken, there's one more person who's still with us. The mayor. Not his ghost, just the mayor. He died in the first game, so how has he returned so casually? He says that his daughter has lost her way, and we must harness the power of all 3 previous villages in order to save everyone, which finally allows us to play Wilfrey's Wasteland. How this hub works is that there are 2 levels dedicated to each previous village, but they're much more challenging with new threats and level designs. Some of these new levels are actually quite tough. Each level has a new theme or design going on, like the water song stages taking place during night, or lava stream being flooded and having rushing lava chasing you. Elements from other stages bleed into each other, making it all feel a little corrupted. The music choices here are all out of sync, like the main hub for lava stream playing right here might sound innocuous, but it really ties together how Wilfrey's Wasteland feels like a bunch of jumbled locations and places stitched together. After all, evil cannot create, only corrupt. After each set of levels, we retrieve an orb and an altar in order to harness their power. I remember as a boy, I used my action replay device on my DS so often with this game that whenever I tried to wipe my save file, I would get stuck on this part and the game simply wouldn't progress. I had corrupted the very code itself. I must have been ass at the game if I felt like cheating on it, but I remember beating it, so what the hell was I doing? After all 6 of these levels, we can finally restore power to Wilfrey's castle. Joey returns to us with Wilfrey and Mary behind him. We don't know what he saw or what they said to him, but it completely changed his outlook on the entire situation. He understands why Mary did what she did, even if he doesn't agree with it. The others return, and Mike is confused, as he tends to be, but Joey is especially focused on Mike, saying how involved he is with everything. Mike has amnesia, and I don't remember if it's even mentioned in this game. Him being the only human in a Raposa world is a little suspicious, so perhaps we finally get the reveal of Mike's backstory. Which is never something I thought I would say. Mike has always been a background character, but he might actually become super important. Both Mary and Joey, who know the truth about why they're fighting, are really focused on him. Joey understands why Mary aligned herself with Wilfrey, but still chooses to defy him and trust the creator. Whatever mysterious events Wilfrey, Mary, and Joey know about is daunting enough to flip allegiances. Mary sided with Wilfrey for the good of the village, but Joey pleads with her that what's coming up is far bigger than their village, or even them and the entire world. Mary switched sides because she needed to do all of this to try and save her village. She tore the Book of Life to prevent Joey from trying to save her, and she worked with Wilfrey because it was the only way to find out the truth about the world, and to ensure her people's survival. We get a flashback summarizing just as much with her father, that mayors must make difficult decisions. Mary finally rejoins our side, rejecting Wilfrey at the end. How can all of you blindly follow your leaders so easily? So that's what this is about. Wilfrey wanted to take Mary from us because he resents us having faith in her, and wants to pervert and subvert the concepts of faith and trust and love, because he's the devil, He resents God and wants to lead people astray and destroy our faith, just as the people's faith in Mary was questioned. But he didn't win that fight. We have Mary back on our side. Curiously, her and Joey's reconciliation is done largely off-screen, but things still aren't easy between the two. She's distraught and not really capable of leadership at the moment, and Joey is tired. He's fought until the very end, stayed faithful, and was able to rescue her. But for now, the hero has to be the one to save the day. Mary's decision is presented as tragic. She laments her choices, but feels like she absolutely had to do it in order to save her people and village. Her and Wilfrey plotted to stop us at every turn, but she really did believe that it was the best course of action. But Wilfrey's the devil. This guy killed your dad. Why would you start trusting him? Wilfrey seems to be telling the truth about whatever's going on in the world outside of his control is threatening everyone, but was sucking all the color out of the world really the best solution? Did he have Riz? That's all I'm saying, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe the seduction happened a little bit differently. Like, what exactly could he have possibly said to her that would have convinced her to say, yeah, Joey, the whole village? I think it does kind of make her a bit stupid. The entire twist really is a house of cards depending on what exactly the twist is at the end, but there's no time for that, because we have to raid Wilfrey's castle before it's too late. Each level featured has a new gimmick that you have to wrap your head around. The first level is linear, but rather you have to find the locked exit by going through a specific sequence of doors to unlock it. It works like those older Mario levels where you have to take specific paths in order to end the infinite scroll. I hate those levels, and I hate this level too. The second level is the penultimate test of your abilities. Nearly everything you've already faced beforehand is cranked up to 11 and mixed together. The switch puzzles have become far more complicated, requiring a lot more forethought and planning. This entire hub world has such an excellent sense of finality to it. Characters are all converging. Our journey has just come to an end, and it all rests on whatever plan Wilfrey has in store. Well, Wilfrey is sick of seeing this all unfold, and just tells us the naked truth. That if we defeat him and restore the color, the entire world will end. He doesn't accompany this with a smirk or some kind of cruel remark. He's dead serious. Joey confirms that Wilfrey, for once, was telling the truth the entire time. Ever since the very beginning of the game, Wilfrey has warned us about what will happen if his will is not iron. And what will happen is the entire destruction of the world and everyone in it. But it will not be done by Wilfrey's hand, but by another. This is quite the bombshell, as you'd imagine. This completely recontextualizes the entire game. This was Wilfrey's plan. Something about him sapping the color from the world was actually keeping it alive, for the most part. Because if he's gone, then everyone dies. Your entire journey is flipped on its head. Wilfrey is the world's savior. But there is a deeper truth that he, Mary, and Joey know that we don't. That maybe letting the world end and killing everyone could be a good thing. But how? How could demolishing our entire party, every member of each town, us, how is that a good thing? We trusted the creator this entire time, and this is our reward? Death? How can Wilfrey be the hero? He's the literal devil! There's just one last thing we haven't heard yet. There's one last secret to be revealed. But to reveal it is to enact our plan of taking down Wilfrey. Understandably, everyone is horrified at the implication of being erased from reality. But as things seem to get worse and worse, their faith is renewed. They came here through faith in the creator, and they can't turn back now. Everyone just has to wait and see, while the hero storms the castle for the final battle. Wilfrey's castle has become a twisted, broken church, a mockery of everything the creator stands for. There are ruined statues of the box art version of the Avatar, the Messiah of the Raposas, a venerated figure that's the only one capable of winning. But when you confront a gloating Wilfrey, he's too powerful. We lose this fight because it's scripted, and Wilfrey's true colors are revealed. He has nothing but bottomless contempt for leaders who are willing to exploit others for fame and resources and wealth, and just as much hatred for those foolish enough to fall for it. He says, "Your reign of tyranny ends here." He's critiquing how Raposa leaders have failed, but it all goes back to the creator. Rosa, Miney, Click, and even Mary all fell to his temptation and were led astray from the creator. And those who cannot be manipulated, like Mary's father, are directly killed by him. What motivates Wilfrey is hatred of the creator and his faithful, and from that, hatred of what he views as poor leadership, and hatred of those who follow it. Everything he has done and will do is out of spite from God. He seeks to pervert and irradiate the very concept of faith in oneself and in each other and in leaders of their nations. He sees God's rule over the universe as tyrannical, and seeks to subjugate it through means of violence and abduction of children. It's actually crazy how close Wilfrey is to being just an accurate depiction of Satan, minus all the human sacrificing, I guess. Even this beam of many colors here is blasphemous. Rainbows represent God's creative beauty in the natural world, and Wilfrey uses it as a harmful tool to kill and maim. With the hero seemingly defeated, all the Raposas can do is pray. The remaining party prays, the people of Watersong pray, the workers of Lavastream pray, even the tribesmen of Galactic Jungle pray in complete fear of the creator. Let there be color. Spelled in the American way. We have been resurrected, and Wilfrey creates something of his own. One last spiteful act to put us down for good. He sits on a throne above the clouds, raining lightning down on us. The most blasphemous act of all. A throne above the clouds is a not-so-subtle jab at heavenly authority. He brumrushes us, turns his clouds into a twister to shred us, and laughs at us haughtily as we try to win. The music takes on the sharp trumpets and stings of an orchestra, a fitting motif for the final battle being held in a church against such a biblical foe. However, this fight suffers from a particularly deadly sin. It's too easy. Wilfrey in the first game had multiple phases with different strategies that required a lot of timing. Here, if you can dodge him and just keep hitting him casually, you win. No second phase, no super difficult attacks, nothing. Perhaps this was a corrective measure from the first game, because I heard many kids felt Wilfrey was too tough in the original, but they perhaps worked too hard to make him easier, because not only did I beat him first try, I barely broke a sweat. The final boss being such a pushover is seriously disappointing, but at least it means I can kill him faster. Wilfrey is dead. Finally dead. He flickered through all his forms. Sock, Salem, even his original Raposa form. But at the end, he released Heather, now cured from her darkness half. Heather and Joey are finally reunited. But the reunion is bittersweet, because defeating Wilfrey and restoring the color only means one thing: the end. We all make it to our original village. Everyone knows what needs to be done. There are no dramatic final words, no comforting moments, just a cold, blank acceptance of what needs to be done. Everyone, men, women, children, have accepted their fate and await the Creator, our final decision, to wipe them all out. We must touch the pillar where the flame once stood. We must interact with the game to wipe it out. Everyone stares blankly at you, and the game won't progress until you press the button. I can't even begin to fathom how much time I spent on this screen as a boy. Even at around 9 years old when I played it, I understood what needed to be done. By this age, I was already... so I was able to stomach it, but the last 2 hours of this game, unbelievably sorrowful and downcast. A game intended for children is telling its child player base to kill the hero they made to save the day, to kill the character they spent all this time caring for, and by their own hand. I would call it sick if it weren't so beautiful. How many kids sobbed at this part? How many children claim to be traumatized because of this event? Children don't usually understand the concept of death, let alone the idea of reality itself being erased. If adults can't even grasp the concept of what nothing looks like, how can you ask a child to? There's only one thing we can do. Just before it all happens, Mike finally asks Mary what exactly Wilfrey showed her that make her switch sides. Her answer? Mike.
We're back to the opening, but we have Mike with us. We get the same dialogue questions we were asked at the very beginning, but it was revealed that Heather was the one answering the questions. Creator. God, just bring back my little brother to me.
Create a place through shapes and shades. Build a blinding stage where beauty is made. But when your colors fade, everything will change.
We see a family, a mother, father, daughter, and the youngest, the son. They're leaving a fairground after a storm arrives. During the chaos of the storm, the family gets into a car crash, resulting in the death of the parents. The children survived, but the daughter was injured in the crash, with half her face bandaged. The boy fell into a coma for an unknown period of time. While the police were questioning the girl, the brother wakes up at last, and the game ends with a shot of Mary and Joey, revealed to be dolls. It might not have hit you just yet, but this ending has completely changed how we interpret the entire game. Nothing is the same after this. Let me explain. Everything that happened in this series was imaginary, taking place inside the comatose mind of this boy. This isn't an uncommon theory people have for a lot of surreal media. It's dubbed the coma theory, and it was huge back in the day of creepypastas. It existed as a weird explanation of how the show's events, like if you watched Pokemon and subscribed to the coma theory, Ash's encounter with the sparrows put him into a coma, and the entire series afterwards takes place in his head, which would explain why he remains 10 throughout the whole show. A lot of people really hate these theories because it tries to apply a morbid topic and logic to a children's property. And they're right, most of them are stupid, but Drawn to Life sticks to landing in ways that basically no other series has. Firstly, look at the art style change. Drawn to Life has a very cute chibi style with bright colors and simple character designs. In the real world, everyone is very detailed and properly proportioned. Fifth Cell hired David Hellman to draw the ending because they wanted someone with a radically different art style who had no prior connections to the project to illustrate how much of a twist ending this was. And it worked perfectly. If the name David Hellman sounds familiar, it's because he was the artist for Braid. If you remember that game, looking at his other works, you can definitely tell it's him. The song playing here, man, it's called Real Life. Another excellent vocal track. The song is bound to wake some deeply repressed memories of people who have played these games many years ago, and to be honest, it did to me. I've played this game many times before, but something about seeing Mary and Joey as dolls just made me feel empty. The ending is horrifically bittersweet and painful. The Raposas all died, which awoke this kid, but his family is dead and his sister is potentially disfigured. This kid just catch a break already? God damn! I think it really has to be one of the most depressing endings to a game I've ever played. There aren't many other games that make me seriously sad when I replay them, but this one just gets me. It gets under my skin. The entire thing wasn't real. That's why the Raposas needed to die, to be erased. They needed to wake up Mike and save him from dying in the hospital. Wilfrey was trying to kill Mike the entire time by sucking out the color from the land, killing his mind and rendering him brain dead in the real world. There's only one save file. In order to reset the game, you have to talk to a sleeping Mike to erase everything, to put him back in the coma, just so you can play again. The only way to really illustrate how excellent this ending is, and how it explains everything, is to go back and re-examine everything. I'm going to be doing some real deep psychoanalyzing on my part, so maybe take some stuff with a grain of salt. We're going deeper than anyone has before. You are watching by this point, right? You didn't fall asleep? Let's start off with real life here. We have this family. 2 unnamed parents, a teenage girl and a young boy. This boy is Mike. Yes, this Mike.
We know this because Wilfrey, Mary, and Joey all confirm as such. It's all but spelled out for us, which would make the Mike in his work a literal self-insert interacting with the characters created in his comatose mind. Mike's status as a human makes sense because he's self-inserting himself in a fantasy world. But who is his sister? Well, it's Heather. We take on the role of Heather answering questions by the police officer a few times throughout the game. Notice how in the real world, Heather's face is partially bandaged, obscuring it, and the drawn-to-life Heather has the half of her face covered in darkness. Mike has some kind of coma awareness, and his fractured mind saw what happened to his sister and factored it into his fantasy story, which is wildly depressing. Mike is at least somewhat aware of his surroundings because he could hear people talking around him but couldn't wake up. I wasn't joking with that Tony Soprano joke, now was I? Some of the gibberish Heather says throughout the chapter even translates into some very interesting phrases when you unscramble them. Heather's face being okay at the end of next chapter might symbolize Heather's face being okay in the real world, but she still has the bandages on in the art, so maybe Mike is just making a wild assumption and hopes his sister will be okay, but she might actually be part disfigured. Now, let's explain the reposes. Mike got these dolls presumably at the fair he was at, and decided to create a fantasy race based off of them. Things get very interesting when you start analyzing the characters. Given Mike's young age, there are only going to be so many people in his life to base these characters off of. I'm going to make an assumption that Mary might be older than Joey. In the first game, she's treated more seriously, while Joey's viewed much more childishly. Joey's a lot more reckless and adventurous, something that comes quite naturally to younger boys. But Joey had to grow up very quickly and assume a lot of responsibility. Mary is almost definitely at least somewhat based on Heather personality-wise. As the older sibling, Heather would assume protection and guidance of the younger one, not dissimilar to how Mary has to babysit Joey for the first game. It's curious that Mary is sanctimoniously based off of Heather, but Heather is also there as a character. Mike seems to like including multiple interpretations of the same character, like he's Nomura playing Kingdom Hearts. Mike interpreting Heather's role in the house as the sibling in charge could easily translate into Mary's role as becoming mayor. He does take a lot of dramatic turns with this character, however. Mary really fumbles the ball at the end and messes everything up, and links up with the guy who killed her dad. So either this was purely his creative decision in the fantasy world, or he might have some underlying feelings about Heather. I should establish a line in the sand where these characters are based off of himself and his family and the characters themselves. Taking traits from people in the real world and making characters is how you're supposed to make characters, but it's not always going to mean this is how he feels exactly about this person. These are characters based off the people and not just the people themselves. Because I'm not suggesting that because Mary and Joey are based off him and his sister, do I mean Mike has incestual feelings for his sister. Yoko Taro did not make this game. And speaking of Joey, I absolutely believe he is a form of self-insert from Mike once again. Joey is very boyish and stubborn, wears his heart on his sleeve and feels like he's stuck in the shadow of the hero and Mary. But by the second game, he's matured so much that he's almost an entirely different Raposa. Not that much time passes between each game, but Joey growing up could represent a shift in Mike's comatose mind, that he might have discarded some part of his boyish traits and become a different person while he was asleep. I mean, think about it. Would you be the same person out of a coma that killed your parents? Would you have the same personality when you woke up? I want to talk more about the relationship of child and parent. There aren't a lot of parents featured in the game, and this is almost for sure because Mike knows in some part that his folks are dead. Joey's family is never mentioned, Mary's father is killed, Rose almost dies in self-sacrifice, and if we apply him relating to people in his life, you see this motif everywhere. The NPCs are likely people Mike's met throughout his life inserted into the story. The police officer, the chef could be the cook serving his sister food in the hospital, etc. It's interesting that Rosa was saved from dying, while the mayor wasn't. Rosa got a direct intervention from the creator, but with the mayor's time was up when Wilfrey confronted him. Perhaps Mike just couldn't handle the idea of a mother sacrificing herself and intervened. But the creator isn't Mike. I'll explain. There are some holes with this theory, mainly regarding Heather. Why is she a Raposa and Mike a human if they're actual siblings? Well, the twist might not have been fully thought out in the first game. Slaska admits as much, that it was only really cemented by next chapter, so Heather and Mike's connection isn't fully established until later. But knowing that things are warped and interpreted in the imagination of a young boy does sort of explain that discrepancy. So a lot of elements from the first game had to be a little bit more fitted to the second game's story twist, but it doesn't break anything established outright. The entire drawing motif and gameplay mechanic is rationalized because Mike is like 11. Of course, he likes to draw in color. The player using the touchscreen and the character speaking to the creator isn't them calling out to Mike, however. It's calling out to God. Let me explain. Mike is embodied by his obvious self-insert, but also as Joey, as Miles, other characters who embody the recurring motif of a young man trying to go up against fate and prove himself worthy of attention, leadership, and love. I think it says a lot about Mike's psychology that this is a recurring character trait for a specific type of character, but the creator is a split, separate entity than these inserts. Perhaps Mike isn't viewing himself as the creator, but either decided to factor in God to a story, or bear with me, God is doing it himself. We have to question how much Mike is aware of what's going on. I've been speaking about him like he's actively world building and plotting, but he's in a coma. His brain is on standby mode. He has enough awareness to make out some speech from the outside world, his sister's bandages somehow, but he doesn't know he's a coma, nor do any of the characters, except for Wilfrey. I have reason to believe that God himself exists in the real world of this game. The entire series is basically one big Christian metaphor, with all the biblical metaphors and terminology to prove it. Mike might not necessarily be Christian himself, but given how Heather is at his bedside praying to God for his recovery, it shouldn't be a big assumption to surmise that their family is Christian, or at least attends church, or simply that God just heard their prayers. If we run with the idea that God exists in this world and he is trying to save Mike's life, then the Repose's relationship with the creator is them following capital G God. His interactions with the world are him trying to save Mike, and he sends a hero to stop Wilfrey and complete all the steps to wake Mike up. Our hero, the player character. This is why our hero, the player character, isn't just a Reposa that can look however it wants. It's a creation by God sent to save him, like an imaginary, crudely drawn Jesus Christ sent to his brain. But there's one character that requires a lot more explaining, Wilfrey. We all know he's the devil, right? But there's so much more to him. Wilfrey's backstory is taken from Lucifer, the fallen angel. He coats himself in shadow because he isn't taken from a figure in Mike's life, he's the literal devil. His plan is to suck up all the color from the world, which would result in Mike's death, which would ultimately lead to the death of the Reposas. Many people say that Wilfrey was not a villain for being correct about the world ending, but the world would end regardless under his plan. Taking the color was gonna kill Mike, so the theory that God or the player being the villain is kinda ridiculous. Wilfrey's Satan, the devil trying to take and corrupt Mike's soul by giving in to his demands. It's not a coincidence that every character who is faithful to the creator is rewarded in a way. Even the mayor, who dies by Wilfrey's own hand, is rewarded by having his children rise up and be the ones to defeat Wilfrey for good. His loyalty and faith would earn him a high place in heaven, seated with the saints and perhaps Christ himself. Wilfrey is Satan who wants Mike to die in the coma, and we know this because Wilfrey was the only one who knew the truth about the world of the Reposas, about who Mike actually is. Even if you want to eliminate the supernatural explanations entirely, Wilfrey could just as easily be the dying cells of Mike's body, his heart and soul breaking down and dying under the stress of a coma. After all, Wilfrey is free will. He hardly ever comes to people with his horns. He comes to them as everything they've ever wanted. Wilfrey tells everyone at the end that their fate is to die, to be erased so that Mike, the real boy, can live once again. But the Reposas accept that. Through faith, they all martyr themselves for Mike's sake, and it's a beautiful, tragic ending. Wilfrey's wasteland is the remains of Mike's shattered mind. Assets and characters pulled from other worlds don't belong there, but it's all in his mind is able to process, because at that point in the story, Mike is barely alive. That's why the color is fading so fast. You can analyze the story under the lens of real spiritual entities fighting for and against Mike, or purely scientific, or both, because things are left open-ended and are dying to be analyzed. Your interpretations may differ or be completely different from my own, But Fifth Cell crafted that story with that in mind, to keep people guessing and talking about it years after the game was made. And it worked. You simply cannot mention this game series without talking about its ending. You know, kind of like The Sopranos. I have to remind people that this is an E for everyone game, which makes it all the more impressive and surprising it goes so in depth about religion and faith and having such a bleak ending. Not everyone was a fan of the ending, however. I know a lot of people who played this as kids and were horrified by it and wanted a simpler, happier ending, which I do understand. The characters have been so faithful to God, but their reward is dying? I can see how someone would be upset with that, especially if they don't have a positive view on religion to begin with. But you know who really hated the ending? The parents of the kids who freaked out about it. So many people complained and gave Fifth Cell backlash that in later printed copies of the game and in the collection edition that launched sometime later, they outright removed the ending and made an alternate one that is much less heavy. In the revised ending, Mike just falls from a tree, gets knocked out for like 20 minutes, and wakes up okay. It's not that it destroys the narrative or anything, but it's so much more tepid and not at all satisfying. Don't worry, it's not at all canon. Parents have the right to be upset with a piece of media that upsets their child, especially since it was advertised as E for everyone, but I feel that this game does kind of rip off the band-aid of your child learning about death. I don't know, I'm not a parent yet, so perhaps my perspective will change when I have to talk about this with my child, and therein lies the beauty of this franchise to me. Drawn to Life, to me and many others, is something that will follow us into our adult lives. It's something we played as children that's always been floating around in our minds, if only as a vague recollection and memories, but it's never left us. I played this game as a child, and I made a joke about being very repressed, but it's the truth. I wasn't good at expressing myself emotionally, and it's something I've only been slowly getting better at. I was fighting with my own Wilfrey, in a way. As of this video, I'm a 22-year-old man, and I only now feel like I understand this game more. This is a game I plan on playing again in my next stage of life, when I'm a father, and beyond that, will I play it again as an old man? Will I pass it on to my firstborn? Will I be lucky enough to experience it with them, or will the cartridge just rot away before I get the chance? Will I die before any of this? Drawn to Life forces me to get inside my own head and question the nature of my existence in a way. This game is not a masterpiece, because there are several points I feel like were definitely rushed as a result of its busy development cycle, but this is something I almost can't put into proper words. I'm so glad the stars aligned for everyone to come together to make this series. It's a well-made, creative, decent platforming game series with a fun drawing mechanic, but its story transcends all of that to me. It just hits people in a place they're used to locking away and never showing. But if I were afraid of showing that, I wouldn't have uploaded the video, now would I? There were a couple points where I was writing the script, empty energy drinks surrounding me. I just had to stand up and take it all in. Remind myself I'm alive. This isn't just a game I'm nostalgic over. This is a series that will follow me for the rest of my life. I'm thinking not just of my memories of the past, but towards the future and what it has in store for me. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. The exact sales of Next Chapter are difficult to pinpoint, but I have a lot of confidence that it sold at least around the same figures as the original. I knew a lot of people who only ever played Next Chapter, like myself, and there was a re-release with the altered ending, and a collection with both games dropped in 2010, so the series was still raking in a lot of money for Fifth Cell. But after Next Chapter, the series was, for lack of better words, done. Where else could they possibly go with this? All the reposes died. Do you recall the other game Fifth Cell was developing alongside Next Chapter? Well, it was an obscure, teeny tiny, insignificant puzzle game called Scribblenauts. Yeah, remember that series? I hope so, because Scribblenauts was an insane, massive release that got all sorts of love and praise. Scribblenauts is a puzzle series where you have to solve puzzles with a magic notebook that can create virtually anything within reason. Scribblenauts to Drawn to Life was what Dark Souls was to Demon Souls, you hear? Okay, picture this. You're raising a dragon to become evil, and you need to summon something to teach it to be evil. So I wrote down lawyer, and the dragon ate the lawyer, which solved the puzzle. I spent so much time creating the most disgusting things possible and adding the writable adjective so I can mount it.
These games even have workshop support on Steam. Scribblenauts Unlimited was actually the very first Steam game I ever owned. I had it on an old account with TF2, my very first laptop, but then I forgot the password when I was 12. And the charm of the series is having a near infinite ways to solve the same puzzle, so it's mostly limited by your imagination and its E for everyone rating. You'll have to see gameplay of it or play it yourself to really understand. Scribblenauts became way more famous than Drawn to Life, and became the main focus of 5th Cell since its inception. Scribblenauts launched in 2009, 1 month before Next Chapter, shortly followed by Super Scribblenauts in 2010. Warner Bros., the series publisher, was very pleased with the sales, and started giving far more modest budgets, which allowed Scribblenauts Unlimited in 2012 and Unmasked in 2013 to become multi-platform for the first time. In the same year Unmasked came out, THQ kinda died, so it was a good timing that 5th Cell linked up so hard with Warner Bros., right? Right? 5th Cell was on top of the world, a household name by this point, making this ultra-popular series that, while super fun and creative, definitely puts story in the background, if it was there at all. However, all good things must come to an end, and 5th Cell started to run into some problems. Right at the height of their apex, they began to fall. In 2014, they were set to release another Scribblenauts game called Scribblenauts Worlds. Information about this title is scarce, but we do know it was planned to be a 3D beat-em-up, an ambitious idea. There are a couple of videos out there showing how far they got into the development, but Warner Bros. Decided to pull the plug, as they tend to do. It's a real shame, but hardly worth ending such a powerful studio, right? 5th Cell decided to make their own game, unconnected from Warner Bros. Do you remember Fate, the initial project that Slaska and Co. were making with their first company, Epix? They revisited the idea of an online RPG with a title called Anchors in the Drift, which popped up on a crowdfunding website and was asking for $500,000. As Slaskas tend to do, there was already a lot of world building penned down, but unfortunately, they just didn't get a lot of people to pledge. It raised less than a quarter of its asking price, so all the work the team had put into proof of concepts and trailers and whatnot was for naught. Things were really starting to get bad really quickly. The year is 2016, and they haven't released a game in 3 years already. While they were still collecting residuals from Scribblenauts Unlimited and Unmasked, a huge portion of their back catalog was stuck on Nintendo DS, and by 2016, we were a year off from the Nintendo Switch being announced. 5th Cell was losing money at a tremendous rate due to no games being made, so they had to revisit an old platform they had mostly left behind, mobile development. Warner Bros. Had greenlit a project in 2014 called Scribblenauts Fighting Words, which was a puzzle RPG spin-off. It was always in development, but now that their last 2 projects had fizzled out, they had to put everything into this one. Sorry, this cutie's lost media now. More info has been leaked about this one than the others, but Warner Bros. Did what they did best and pulled the plug on it. Again, 5th Cell could not cope with the cancellation of this title, and had to lay off 45 employees immediately afterwards. 5th Cell at most had about 200 employees, so about a quarter of them being laid off right away was a harsh blow, and it would ultimately lead to the sad fate 5th Cell to this day faces. They were unable to produce a game in 3 years. So much of their funds and staff had bled out, so they had to panic and essentially operate on standby mode. Interviews with Slaska at the time claimed only a tiny amount of people were still employed at the company. Many prominent team members like Joseph Tringali were either let go or quit of their own accord. So, this video is coming out in 2024. What has 5th Cell done since then? Well, they released a self-published game called Castlehold in 2021, a free-to-play 3D deck-building game. They haven't shut down, but they entered an even worse fate, potentially becoming an auxiliary company for Warner Bros. Whatever garbage Warner Bros. Was vomiting, it wasn't unrealistic to assume that 5th Cell had to provide some help. After all, how else would they stay afloat? This is a terrible fate for any company to fall under, and continue to toil in. I've already called a fatwa against Warner Bros. For what they did to Fear, but the fact they would cancel 2 of their projects and be responsible for the destruction of such a promising and creative studio is just terrible. All for what? So they get to release Kill the Justice League so it could bomb horribly? So Warner Bros. Was uninterested in letting 5th Cell make any new Scribblenauts game. because there was another game in the franchise in 2020, but made by another studio. And many of Fifth Cell's other titles were stuck to a THQ publisher deal, and THQ did the classic party trick of exploding and dying at the time, so things were really going bad for literally everyone involved. It seemed like Fifth Cell was in a fate worse than death, unable to make any new games in the franchises that made them famous, or create something original and new with the budget they deserved. But what of the other employees that were let go from Fifth Cell? Well, they founded their own company. Much like how Fifth Cell was founded hot off the heels of Epic shutting down, Digital Continue was funded in 2016 by ex-members of Fifth Cell. They made an original game called Next Up Hero that launched multi-platform and is one of the games of all time. Somehow scored a deal with Valve to put some of their characters in the game, which is neat. I still don't want to play this though. People almost universally agreed that the game was mid and had some pretty wild technical issues. I'm taking people's word because, to be honest, their other projects are far more interesting. THQ was split up and rights were remanaged, and THQ Nordic, the false god claiming to be THQ, handed publishing rights of Lock's Quest over to Handy Games, who contacted Digital Continue to remake the game, a daring choice, considering they were missing the guy who directed the project and wrote the story. But did it work out? No. I don't really want to play this game, and I think by judging the Steam user rating for it, I don't think everyone else who did play it did either. People cited really wonky controls, especially compared to the DS original, and yet more outlandish bugs as the reason why this game sucked. But THQ had the publishing rights for Drawn to Life. You know, remember the actual topic of the video? What happened to that? Well, apparently in 2014, 505 Games somehow got the right to it. I don't know if they bought it, or they just obtained it by having an open hand ready to catch the debris in the explosion of THQ, but they got it. They got Way Forward of all companies to make a mobile port of the first game that got delisted within 1 year. So I guess they just sat on it for years and years until they caught wind of Digital Continue. They're compromised of people who made this game. Yeah, it's missing the guy who wrote the story and made the concept and led the team and did a lot of the work himself, but surely no one would notice, right? In October of 2020, it would leak from a Taiwanese rating site that another Drawn to Life game was ready to be released. And in November, 505's French YouTube channel accidentally leaked the entire trailer, so people now knew this game was coming out. The fanbase was small, but very passionate. After the franchise was dead in the water since 2008, this was huge news. But remember, Slaska had zero involvement with this game whatsoever, and I think you'll be able to tell. So on December 7th of 2020, Drawn to Life 2 Realms was released for PC, Nintendo Switch, and mobile devices. Let's see how they could explain the series coming back. So you know how I've been playing and analyzing these games play by play, going through it in a linear fashion, expressing myself throughout. 2 Realms will not work like this because it isn't worth spending that much time on. Digital Continue had such a rocky start, and nearly every reoccurring problem the studio faced is brought to the forefront here. When a series gets a new entry with zero involvement from its original creator and/or writer, it usually doesn't end up being a good thing. And 2 Realms proves this by giving us a cold open to the fact that not only are the Raposas all completely fine, but there's an entirely separate human realm that mirrors it. So let me calmly explain why this makes me so mad without shouting. You know how the entire series was Mike's coma dreams? Yeah, that was just retconned. No big deal, right? Just the entire story of the series thrown in the garbage. Surely they have a reason why this is the case, right? No, there isn't. As far as I played, at least, you just have to accept the reality that the coma does not matter to this game, and just follow with the new explanation. That the 2 first games happened, but next chapter's ending didn't happen as well? Raposas remember and know who Mike is, but Mike doesn't remember us. So I guess a dream or mental version of him was in the Raposa realm? Then when he did wake up from the coma, that version left and shared none of his memories. How does that explain the ending? It doesn't. There's taking a new creative turn with an old series, and then just tearing it down. And what Digital Continue chose to do was tear it down so viciously that it's almost unrecognizable. Everything about this game feels like a shambling zombie of a franchise that I feel quite strongly about, and a lot of other people do too.
There's no attempt to placate people who were excited for this game, to refire the nostalgia and bank on what a successful series this used to be. And nowhere stronger than this than the actual gameplay. Drawn to Life is a platformer series that strongly emphasized using the touchscreen to interact with the game world, mainly by drawing. Two Realms is a puzzle platformer with extremely light combat. Each level is really 3 levels bundled together. The objective is to just get to the end, and each level is as big as one screen. It can be as simple as just make it to the end, or kill all foes before you make it to the end, or interact with this sluggish and uninteresting Mario Maker style puzzle that requires you to place 3 enemies at a time to make it to the end. Drawn to Life was never an outstanding platformer, but all of these new styles fail in exceedingly original ways. Firstly, why are levels just one screen? It doesn't help that you get like 1 pit of spikes and maybe 2 enemies per encounter, but do they have to be so short? They feel like WarioWare microgame parodies of a real game that weren't meant to be taken seriously. But they are. The Mario Maker stages don't seem like a bad idea, but trust me, these guys aren't Nintendo. There really isn't a lot of creative strategies because you get the same 3 objects to place each time, so you aren't going to find multiple ways to execute the same challenge, rather just place the enemies before you interact with a boring and hardtack flavored level. The levels were already underwhelming, but having to design them first feels like such a leap back. Nowhere near as creative and invigorating as the action platforming in Next Chapter. Why did they decide to do this? It doesn't really feel like an adventure because you aren't just playing levels, each set has to be achieved by talking to NPCs. There's this book called The Book of Imagination that allows you to travel between the human and Reposer realm, but also enter people's minds to solve problems. So every level is wrapped with the context of having to solve a dispute between characters. It's a really weird narrative framework because characters will often get into arguments with each other, and it doesn't matter what personal grievance they have, you beat the level and then they back down from whatever's bothering them. You're basically gaslighting them. You know what's crazy? There are no boss fights, and not a lot of ramping challenge. It's just a straight shot of mediocrity for more time than I cared to play. I could see this entertaining children, but how many people are still interested in Drawn to Life? This is a series where the children who played it growing up are now young adults. It came out during 2020, during a lockdown. Do you know how amazing it would have been for a 19-year-old me to find out a series I kept so close to me has returned for a new entry? What a disaster! Shut it down! Because everything here just isn't good enough. Children are fine with basically anything, not because they're stupid, but because they have no standards and adults do. This is below the standards of the series we were accustomed with, even for mobile games. Who is this meant for? To bring in new kids to the franchise? Neither original games were on mobile, well, originally, one was up for 1 year, or even Switch. I guess they didn't feel like bringing the actual good games first, then seeing if people wanted another one. So you threw out the fun gameplay for really tepid puzzle platforming that could barely keep a child entertained. Cool, awesome, thanks. You throw out the narrative for Next Chapter for what? Oh, I'll tell you what. There is a story in Two Realms. It's just the most boring, flavorless, and tripe experience I've ever had in a long, long time. We have so many reoccurring characters, Mary, Joey, Mike, but they're not here. I don't care if the text box says them. These aren't the characters I knew and loved. So little of their personalities are present here, you might as well be interacting with faceless people the entire game. It's like all the character development was forgotten, but the narrative events kept the same, even if they're basically never talked about. The hero returning after an unknown amount of time and meeting Mary and Joey again feels like nothing. Did everything we worked towards together mean nothing? Even the village feels at odds. It's nice to see the NPCs who were left out of Next Chapter return. Even the other villagers are back from other locations, having moved into Rapoville afterwards. Hey, remember us from that better game? We're here too. I really didn't want to play this game. I'll be honest, I grabbed some cutscenes from YouTube. I'll link the brave soul who recorded these because damn! Playing this is kind of like twisting a knife deeper and deeper into my gut. So let me break down the story more. There are some positives, but just hidden like hay in a needle stack. So we need to cope with the concept that the coma endings didn't happen, I guess. But the car crash that killed Mike and Heather's family still happened. After that, the town of humans, Belleville, I think, something like that, went crazy and people started to really distrust each other, start scrapping, which set the stage perfectly for a new villain to step in. Alldark, a robe-clad shadowy figure that messes with people's minds for the nookie, I guess? What's his deal? Well, there's this hooded figure that's silently helping Mary throughout the entire game. He's unnamed, but if you were to look into the game's files, you will find out that this is actually Wilfrey, once again resurrected. How? I don't know. But I guess Wilfrey's shadow form split from his original Raposa form and became Alldark. It's kind of interesting, but only kind of. Doesn't really go anywhere or lead to anything. I've been harshly critical and very pessimistic, but there is something I really enjoy about this game. In foregoing the coma twist, we learn more about the separate realms. Each human and Raposa has a direct counterpart that mirror each other. Take the doctor character, there's Curie, the Raposa, and Cure, the human doctor. Most of the human NPCs have a Raposa resemblance for this reason. But we get introduced to a new character in this game, Allie, a childhood friend and love interest for Mike. Even from the first glance, Allie is so obviously Mary's counterpart it's not even funny. I like Allie, she's a decent character with some story importance and works well to complement Mike. So if I retroactively explain next chapter via two realms, we have to revise Mary's inspiration that she is instead Allie, instead of an entirely inspired by Heather. I would argue Joey and Mike are each other's counterparts, but it gets even more loosey-goosey with Heather. Only her human form is here, no Raposa, I think. If they had totally committed to the two realms, wouldn't it be cool to see Raposa and human characters interact? The two realms barely share much interaction aside from the player character. The series did so much stuff that 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim did way later. Might as well go all the way. Oh yeah, this game is kind of bugged too. I didn't encounter game-breaking glitches myself, but there are a lot of things that don't work as intended for many people on PC, like achievements. One of them is so bugged, you straight up cannot obtain it without modifying your save. How did it launch like this? How has this not been patched for 4 years? I guess they just don't care. But you know what the most damning thing of all is? Because there's only one thing I've been hiding. So, you know how the title of the game is Drawn to Life? How you draw stuff and it comes to life in a gameplay format? You draw one thing in this game, the avatar. It's a pretty good system with a lot of refinements due to being on modern hardware like an actual color picker, but that's it. You don't draw a single other thing. At least as far as I got, you don't draw anything else. So the title of the game feels like mockery. You barely draw, and nothing here feels alive. The story is just sauntering around helping people's boring problems by completing dookie levels. So I ask again, who is this game for? There are very obvious nods and hints to people who've played the games, the older ones, so older fans are still in mind, but the actual gameplay present is beyond baby mode. What happened? This isn't Digital Continue's first game. They know how to make games, allegedly. Like mobile games. And you know what really chaps my ass? After this entire sloppy, boring, unfinished, rushed, delusional, miserable, and generally all-around terrible, no good, bad experience, Joey and Mary meet on the secret beach. And not only do they finally get together, Joey just pops the question. He and Mary get married for good, and it's such a tender, sweet moment. I've been following and thinking about these characters for over a decade, almost 2 at this point. Mary struggles with confidence and leadership and doing the right thing for her people, for God, really spoke to me. And Joey's life being stacked against him, but still choosing to give his life to the Lord and never giving up is downright inspirational. It means so much to me, and seeing something so tender and beautiful in such a soulless, palpably abandoned game isn't a twist of the knife in my gut. It just broke my heart. It's not this game is some kind of travesty against man or came out just to ruin something, but I can't entirely assume best intentions. I know I'm being a bit unreasonable, but I can't really find a single person who likes this game, let alone defend it. It appeals to no one. The top-rated Steam guide is a guide telling you how not to freak out over the game. This is such a low point, such a disappointing personal failure to me.
It's the kind of experience that doesn't even lead me to being upset at the game, but for myself for even believing I was gonna have fun or be rewarded for being a patient fan. All of these years waiting, and for what? To have my heart broken? It's not even like this game is just outrageously bad, some kind of 0 out of 10, this game will brick your computer. No, it's just boring. And that's the most unforgivable part of all. A lot of games are considered bad, but it takes something truly exceptional to not only be boring, but to make something boring out of such an incredible framework. Fifth Cell worked themselves sick, making a compelling experience for all ages, something children loved and adults could come back to fondly. Slazka worked tirelessly for this, managing multiple projects because he believed in himself and his team so strongly. And where did it take us? That all of their IPs are pimped out to teams that either aren't able to match them or don't care to. You can't even use the touchscreen on the Switch version of Two Realms. It's a drawing game and you can't even use the touchscreen? If you like this game, more power to you. Really, I mean that. I am so happy you were able to enjoy yourself. But I can't. In retrospect, it just pains me more and more the more I type out. It's hard to explain, but the sauce is not there. For every positive, like the excellent soundtrack by legendary David J. Franco, to the new art style that I do like a lot, there's 10 things I hate that completely prevent me from embracing this game. And according to the studio, this was to gauge people's interest in the franchise, and if it sold well enough, then other games or remakes of the first 2 games are on the table. This is how you bring back the franchise? Not by embracing the creative, loving energy of the first 2, but by a broken, token, lazy effort. It's been 4 years since that statement, and once again, Drawn to Life is dead in the water. Sales figures are unknown, just not published, and who knows if Digital Continue felt it's worth putting effort into do anything else with the franchise. Tringali has done interviews talking about the potential direction of the series if people like this game enough, but again, notice how many people are rushing to Two Realms' defense? It didn't dare to be different, it dared to be boring. And for that, I don't think I want any more games to come out. At least not by the current ability Digital Continue has. I'm sorry for the harsh words, but what Fifth Cell accomplished emboldened and gave me enough passion to express myself like this, and what Digital Continue did only inspired paranoia and cynicism. The best thing this game did was not market itself, so people couldn't be more disappointed. But there's nothing to gain about being pessimistic. If Drawn to Life has taught me anything, it's that at the darkest moments, you have to be your most hopeful and faithful. And I want to take that message to heart by instead choosing to be positive and constructive. So what's in store for the future of Drawn to Life, Fifth Cell, and Jeremiah Slazka? It's been years since we've really heard from them. They still have that Castlehold game, which was self-published, so they aren't entirely tethered to Warner Bros., which is a good thing. Because with hope, Warner Bros. Will shut down within 10 years. So the solution is simple on paper. Just make a new hit game. Obviously easier said than done, but I don't know what to tell you. Slazka has very clearly demonstrated the ability to lead teams to wonderful heights, and is clearly a passionate and skilled writer with a wonderful creative mind. Drawn to Life occupied a really specific niche of something meant for children, but was written so well and proved to be so memorable that there's still a dedicated following even all these years later. The use of the unique DS technology is definitely there, but with how video game consoles are as of now, there's basically nothing distinguishing them aside from their plastic shells. The best possible choice of console would be the Switch if you wanted to capitalize on the very proprietary hardware, but perhaps the smartest move would be multi-platform. He can make whatever he wants, but maybe the keys to getting back his previous Henry Hill status would be to finally try and make that MMORPG he's always wanted. But I think a brand new series inspired by Drawn to Life might be his golden ticket. He doesn't have any control over Drawn to Life as a franchise, but that wouldn't stop him from making a new spiritual successor. I can only hope this hypothetical series would be the Bioshock to Drawn to Life System Shock. Slazka can do what he wants, he's a grown man. But I really want to see this guy back in the games industry as a big name, because creatives like him are hard to come by, and he made 2 of the biggest kids franchises in the DS back in the late 2000s, so he's more than just a fluke. As for Drawn to Life itself, that's entirely in the hands of Digital Continue.
The shaking, unsteady, broken hands of digital continue. I'll be frank, and I apologize for saying something disparaging, but I do not trust this company to make a video game worth my time. And unless they are able to release something that would prove me wrong, my stance is final. I do not want a continuation, sequel, or even a remake of the first two games if our bar for quality is what we have now. There's always the slight possibility they're able to rapidly improve, but I don't know, maybe? So outside of outsourcing it to another company, what is there to do? 505 Games owns the IP, I think, so maybe they can get people who have their hearts in the game more. But if remakes of the first two games bundled together won't do, I do have another suggestion. Tringali did mention that more than just games could be in store for Drawn to Life's future. So I suggest perhaps instead of a remake of the old adventures, maybe we can do an animated show. The drawing aspect would be a bit hard to replicate, but a one-season show would honestly blow up on social media. People wouldn't be used to seeing such an outward Christian-themed show, especially in a positive context. So I think it has a real shot as something meant for young audiences that adults would enjoy. Just go get the Bluey audience, they'll love it. I have no intention of ending this video on a downer, but I don't think I need to give a grand mission statement saying my feelings on the franchise because we're like 3 hours into this video. It's a series that I don't think I'll ever really give up on. If it's taught me anything, it's to have faith, even in the darkest moments. I can't tell you what's going to happen next to the franchise, but I can tell you what I have for it. Hope. I have hope that we can get an entry that will prove me wrong and be a beloved title, or we get amazing remakes of the original games on PC to draw new life in the series. Pun not intended. There is an audience for this series. Just look at the view count of this video. Everyone who's played this has a story with this franchise, and I want to hear them in the comments below. Did this game make you feel existential or give you a sense of dread that has never been cured? Please, let me know. That's all for now. Have a lovely rest of your day.